Alright, we should be live. I need to move the chat so that I can see it. Hello, Procelus. Shrink it down a little bit. I really wish the game audio would not die every time I clicked out of the screen. Or clicked off the screen. I did figure out that I could actually monitor the stream by just having it set up on my phone here, because that's something I've been struggling with, is how can I just see the stream? I'm also really, like, I can't get used to how behind the stream time is. I forgot about this with streaming, that, like, there's like a 2 or 3 minute delay on things, and then sometimes the chat will respond to me, because I haven't streamed in a while, and I really am enjoying it. Like, I love streaming it, not just like video game stuff, though video game stuff is super easy, but also, like, you know, I would like to do some actual streaming stuff. I did discover last time that I had made actually, it still doesn't seem to be quite working, so just bear with me a moment. But I had discovered that there was a slight issue, and the YouTube chat was not appearing in the YouTube chat window on the stream, and it now does seem to be. Even though it's just really behind, but that's okay. The avatar is saying, yeah, I'm honestly amazed any of this ever works. It is honestly amazing. You know what? I do have to, I'm gonna apologize. I'm gonna lose the jaunty cap because it just doesn't work with the headset. So, the headset. Yeah, so we are back with another Return of the Obra Dinn. So we have returned to my return to the Return of the Obra Dinn. Which, oh, I see BC56 beat me to that joke, which means BC56 must now be, like, eliminated from the chat. And actually, now I'm looking at it, I think the hat needs to stay on because, man, my head is shiny. So we're gonna put the jaunty hat just back on there. It's just the glare from the light overhead, because I keep my hair shaved kind of like I keep it at 1 or 2, just because otherwise I can't control it. And that's the fun facts for tonight. So we're continuing our Return of the Obra Dinn stream tonight, and we're gonna jump into that in just a moment. I'm not gonna do a whole long intro. If you didn't watch last week's stream, you're coming into the middle of it. And you should probably watch last week's stream and then watch this recorded. I mean, you're welcome to stay anyway. But I'm not going to re-explain all the shit I did last time. We spent 4 or 3.5 hours or some nonsense like that. And I'm not going to go ahead and re-explain and re-tutorialize the whole damn game. I'm going to assume you watched part 1. That said, I'm going to throw out one thing. And I would like to do another stream. Well, no, it's a floppy. It's a slop hat. The avatar's making fun of my hat now. It's a slop hat. So it's this. It's like a little pancake. Okay, it just sort of. I'm gonna be honest. This is not a Return of the Obra Dinn costume. This was a Renaissance Fair costume that just looked like it would work. I really didn't need to do a stream. Do a costume for the stream. You know what? Enough of this shit. Let's just get started. So, oh, I would like to do another stream. Now, next week I'm going to do, for my supporter community as the Angry GM, I'm going to be doing a live stream on Wednesday night. But I think the following Wednesday, like, I might continue this with some other fun, lighter, puzzly type games that we can really pick apart. And the other thing I was thinking of doing was returning to Tunic and going through Tunic, because, man, did that have some awesome puzzles in it. So that's something I might consider. And then figuring out how to do some D&D type content. But that's for another time. We're going to return now to the Obra Dinn and pick up where we left off. Oh, and now, as the game is booting up, I have to switch scenes. We'll let the Obra Dinn take the lead. Okay, and we are now back on the deck of the ship. We have gone through now every fate. We have seen every memory, and we have explored the ship quite thoroughly. And in the last part, we went through what I called the observation phase. Okay, which is, we didn't try to make any deductions. We didn't try to put any information together. We just kind of took in everything. You can sort of think of it like walking a crime scene and just letting your eyes see and your ears hear and your nose sniff and your tongue taste and all of your senses sense, and just letting all the information kind of wash into you. And only then, once you have a really good picture of everything and you've noticed all the things there are to notice, do you start investigating in detail. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So in this, we're going to do part 2. Actually, I'm hoping to finish the whole game. And it shouldn't take nearly as long as it did last week. Even though I think we only solved, like, 2 fates. And the chat's buried. I just need to get the chat here. And every time I click off the window, the audio stops, and I'm sorry about that. So, tonight we're going to finish everything, even though last week we solved 8 fates and we got confirmations on 6 of them or something like that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to try and piece together the story that we experienced in jumbled, reversed, chronological order last time. Okay, and what we're going to do is, because the game allows us to do this now, because it has tracked every corpse we found, it will allow us, and it shows the flow of time, it will allow us to now go through everything in chronological order except for one messy chunk. And so we can experience the whole story of the ship from beginning to end. We might do a little light backtracking. That is, if something from a scene gives us an immediate thought that we want to go back to record in a previous scene, we can go back and do it. Limited backtracking is okay, but we're not going to jump the hell around too much. We are going to attempt to identify everybody we can in a scene, but we're still going to stick with our rule of positive identifications only, or at least strong identifications only. We have to have a good reason to say a person is who we're saying they are. If I can't say, this is the reason why I know this person is this person, we're not going to log it yet. Okay? That said, we're also going to take note of any important seeming details that we want to carry along with us. And the other thing we're going to do, which I didn't put in my little notes, we are going to take notes, by the way. This little notebook, I'm actually going to use it to take some notes. But it turns out you don't actually need to take a whole lot of notes. We are going to take note of important seeming details. And one other thing that I didn't note is that we're going to pay careful attention to see if we can identify who is doing what jobs. Because it's a very underutilized feature that actually helps you solve everything a lot quicker. And I'll show you what I mean. But for now, we're going to open up our... So, yeah, let's open up our book, and I'm going to forget how to use the controls again. Okay. So we know this ship, the Obra Dinn, that we are attempting to investigate. It's set out from London initially. Okay. And this ship is what's called an East Indiaman. Okay, which means that it was a ship that was a merchant ship for the Dutch East India Company, or the East India Company. Because at the time I don't know that it was still called the East India Company. These were large ships. They were some of the biggest merchant ships that could sail. Though technically the term East Indiaman could refer to just about any ship that sailed, that was registered by the East India Company. This specific ship is actually based on a naval ship called the HMS Leopard. And actually, there were numerous HMS Leopards. The HMS Leopard that Lucas Pope said he based this on was built in 1790, even though it was commissioned something like 20 years before, and it was laid down, and then it was on pause, and there was construction delays and stuff before it was finally built. But it was finally built in 1790. It was a rather famous ship, and it participated in an incident that was a precursor to the War of 1812 between the United States and Britain, called the Chesapeake Leopard Affair. But this ship is actually not an exact replica of the HMS Leopard. It's an amalgamation of different ships. So, for example, the original HMS Leopard had like a 350 person crew, I think, and it had something like 50 guns. And the Obra Dinn is crewed by 50 people, or 51, I think is the right count, and it has 16 guns on its deck. Anyway, our ship, according to the notebook that we were sent by one Henry Evans, our ship left London in 1703, and it took a brief trip to Falmouth, England, where it took on some additional cargo. And so this is the first scene. Okay, this is the first memory, the first tragedy that happened on the boat.
Wait! No!
Now, we've already heard all the audio dialogue in the game, so unless there's particular dialogue that's important from this point on, I am just going to skip through it. Okay? Now, the practice of taking on cargo after the ship was underway was actually very common, because it was often cheaper to load up basic provisions outside of London. So anyway, but what we see here is that the crew is loading the ship. They are taking on this cargo, they're loading the ship, there's an accident, a rope broke, and a man is crushed to death. We don't know who this man is, but from a much later scene we might remember that he has a brother on board, and the two brothers, they share the last name Peters. We have no way right now of identifying this person. But there is something we do know, and that is that that absolutely every one of these people working down here, it's going to take me a minute to remember the controls. Every one of the people okay, it's giving me a tutorial. I guess we didn't see this the last time. It's telling me that the triangles are deduction ratings. Okay. Remember what I said, that all of the people on the ship were going to stick to their jobs, stick to their position. They would often stay together by their nationalities. Okay? So we can say that absolutely in fact, there's an easier way to do this as I'm reeling. Okay. That every person in this scene is a seaman. Because they are moving around below decks, they are moving cargo. Except this fella. He's a passenger. Okay, and we already identified him. He's Hak Sung Lao, and we know what's going to happen to him. Now, a lot of people, when they play this game, they don't actually bother flagging people by position. And in so doing, we know that's Solomon Syed. We identified him already. And in so doing, they actually make the game a lot harder on themselves. Because if you do get to a point where you need to rely on, on process of elimination, it can help you figure out, it can help you kind of figure out, narrow down who you're trying to eliminate. So all these people down here, we know are seamen. I don't think we can see anyone up above. I think the only person we can see is Lars Lind. We're going to keep an eye on Lars Lind because he is everywhere. He's one of those people who ends up in every scene. But otherwise, that's all this scene tells us, is that the ship was underway, it took on cargo, and somebody was crushed after a rope broke. Lars Lind does take the blame for it later. Okay. So that's chapter 1. And in fact, that's everything that... Whoops. That's everything that happened in chapter 1. So now, the ship travels south from England, and somewhere off the coast of Portugal, we encounter chapter 2. And if we can't remember where the corpses are, remember that the book does mark each one. So we're going to head up to the orlop deck outside the surgery, the ship's surgery. And we're going to go and explore Bitter Cold. And people who've played this game before, and this is a Bitter Cold, will know that this scene is... I'm going to be quiet. We're going to let the dialogue play out. We want to hear this dialogue.
Saya tutup. Aku terpilih.
Okay, this scene is one of the most information-rich scenes you're going to get in the entire game, and the number of details in it is actually really amazing. So what's happening at this point is one of the crewmen, Solomon Syed, he caught an illness, and he passes away in his sleep. His crewmates who are sleeping with him have gotten up to check on him. Okay. And one of the things that... And this is exactly the scene where I figured this out. One of the most useful things to discover is that on every hammock, or most every hammock, there is a number. And if we look in the crew manifest, so... if we look in the manifest... Okay. I'm not going to do this every time. I'm going to ask you to trust me in certain things because flipping through the book will take time. So I am going to start doing things a little bit more quickly. But Solomon Syed is number 54. And he is sleeping in hammock 54. That means that the crew members are assigned hammocks based on their numbers. Okay? That's a really useful piece of information, and I think that the way you load into this scene so that the hammock number is very near to your eye line, I think that's intentionally done so that you see it. But knowing that now, knowing the crewmen tend to stay together, we can actually make a couple of positive identifications right now. Okay, so for example, as we look at this scene, we can figure out, so what happened is Syed was coughing in his sleep, he woke his friends up, and one of his friends, the guy in this hammock, got up to check on him. How do we know it's the guy in this hammock? Because remember, all of the people tend to stay within their own nationality groups. And we can see that there's 4 Indians, Renfred Rajub, Abraham Akbar, William Wasim, and Solomon Syed. 51, 52, 53, and 54. Hammock 53 is empty, and the guy is standing right here. So we can deduce just from that, if it'll let me zoom in on him, that this guy... I really hate how this is working. Okay. This guy here is, what did I say? He's 54? No. Shit, I forgot. I forgot the number that I just said out loud. He's 53. Okay. I really hate doing this with the keyboard and mouse. I really do. Okay. He's 53. Okay. William Wasim. Because of the delay BC 56, I just got that in the chat. Okay, and the game tells us we're correct. And that we identified several people correctly. So we're up to 9 correct identifications now. Okay, gets quicker from here. Okay. Okay. Now, we also know this guy here is 51. The problem is... Oh, and we can actually identify... Whoops. So here's how this works. I have to be careful to not be moving my mouse. So he's 51. Renford Rajub. And then here, back here... Well, now this is interesting. He has an X on his hammock. Okay. Maybe his original hammock was destroyed and he had to be issued an extra, or maybe they didn't have one with the right number on it. We don't know. But because we know that the Indians stay together... Okay. And also, if you look at people's facial features, like the game does use certain facial... it does use facial cues. One of the things you'll notice is that the Indians all have very similar facial hair, and they of course have short hair. And in the graphics of the game, not so much in the text, but they have darker skin, as befits an Indian, one of Indian descent. And so we don't know why Abraham Akbar does not have a marked hammock of his own, but we can guess that this is Abraham Akbar. But now let's go looking around, because when we know that, what else might we discover? Okay, so here we have people sleeping here, and if we can't see their faces, we can't match them up in the book. Okay, but we have 55, 56, 57, and 58. And who are they? Yeah. Okay. This does not scroll very fast at all. Okay. So we have a collection of seamen, including Hamadou Diome, and then some Englishmen and an Irishman. Patrick O'Hagan's in here somewhere. Doesn't tell us much. Here we have 3 Russians. We know they're Russians because we could overhear them talking in the dialogue. They were playing cards. And they were speaking in Russian, and they were talking about not cheating. We can't really see... Oh, we can see. Whoops. Zoom. So we can see their tags here, right? Okay. So we know they're the Russians, 45, 46, 47. But we also notice that one person, and we can't match them up to their hammocks. We don't know which hammock is which person's. But what we do know is that this guy, number 47, he has some personal effects. He has this satchel and a pipe. And that seems important. If I see the satchel and the pipe later, I'll know who this guy is. So we're actually going to make a note of this. So, number 47, satchel and pipe. And forgive my bad typing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. What else do we got? Alright, we got someone named 37 here. And what's this? His arm is draping down. And he has a distinct tattoo on his arm of a woman. So again, we don't know who he is because we can't see his face. But if we ever see that tattoo again, we know we're looking at crewmate 37. So we're going to go ahead and make a note of that too. Right? Okay. Now we're kind of at the edge of what we can see. 42, nothing interesting going on over there. And who's over here? We have 36, really nothing here. And then we've got this group of people. Okay. This is an infamous group of people. Okay. So there's a couple of things to take note of here. If we look at the numbers, we got 39, 40, 41, 59, and 38. So 38 through 41, and then we have 59. So who are these people? Okay. So we have 4 Chinese topmen, 38 through 41. And remember, topmen are people who are rated to work in the rigging. So whenever we see people climbing around in the rigging or off the deck of the ship, anywhere above the deck of the ship, it's going to be a topman. So we have the 4 Chinese topmen, but we also have someone else here. Okay, we have number 59, George Shirley, who is an English seaman. He's not a topman. He's not Chinese. He's conspicuously out of place. And so we might wonder why. Is he maybe friends with the Chinese folk? Is he not liked by his own crewmen, and so he hangs out with them? We don't know, but it's an oddity, and we're going to note it. Okay. So, number 59 hangs out with Chinese topmen. Okay. Okay. The other thing to note is that we can't see, and this is one that I only like. You come back through a couple of times before you notice it. 2 of these folks have very distinct shoes. This is going to be important because the Chinese topmen drive a lot of people crazy. So first we can see this guy. He has either shoes with stockings or he has lacy sandals, whatever they are. I'm going to call them laced up sandals because they lace up his legs. So number 39 has lacy sandals. Okay, laced sandals. Okay. And number 38, his shoes, unique amongst pretty much all of the rest of the crew. Whenever you see their shoes, most of the crew is just wearing these plain black shoes that have very little detail to them. But this guy, number 38, his shoes are open on the top. He has open topped shoes. So if we ever see a guy with open topped shoes, we know he's crewman number 38. All right. We also might want to take note, like you can take note of where you are on the ship to get some sense of where people's sleeping positions are. So we are on the gun deck, and we are on the starboard side, and you know, we're basically toward the forward hatches, on the starboard side of the ship. On the gun deck. That's where they're sleeping. Okay. And now we have pretty much scoured this scene. We have pulled a lot of information out of this scene. Okay. And I think we can leave it now. We can always come back later. If we think we might have missed something or we need more details. Peter Lur is saying he's a what now? I don't know what that's... Or Peen Lur. I don't know what that's in reference to. So if you want to clarify your question, I'll try to answer. Okay, now we can continue the story with Chapter 2, Part 2, A Bitter Cold. So after Solomon Syed gets sick...
Well?
Same as the other fellow. Some lung disease, not consumption. Made worse by the cold.
Will it spread?
If so, we'd all have it. They must have picked it up at the Alaska house. I checked all hands just now, and everyone is healthy.
And him? What are his chances?
I gave him some laudanum. We'll see.
Okay. So, in the previous scene, we actually saw this guy. If we zoom in on him now, we'll know that we identified him as Renfred Rajub. He was the guy sleeping next to Solomon Syed, who had his arm draped over his head, and wasn't getting up while the other two were checking on Solomon, indicating that he was already getting sick. And at this point, Solomon's corpse is outside, and his two friends are obviously upset about what's going on. There's a bit of bonus information in this scene if you have a little bit of knowledge of the time period, because the fella talking said that he picked it up in the Lasker house. Laskers were Indian nationals who traveled to England to work as sailors, and they would often live together in cheap boarding houses called Lasker houses. So these folks were Indian nationals. They were living in a boarding house for Indian sailors when they were hired on. And unfortunately, you know, like all those cheap boarding houses and flop houses and stuff, they were rife with disease and just spread around. Okay. But what else do we see in this scene? We're in the surgery, and we've got these two folks talking. This guy appears to be dressed in officer's garb. This guy is sitting here next to the patient, and giving. So just from looking at their body language, these are the two people who are talking. This guy is probably giving the diagnosis, and this guy is one of the ship's officers taking the diagnosis. We then have this guy lounging back here, not really participating. It's not a stretch to say this fella here is the ship's surgeon. He's the doctor. He's giving a diagnosis. We don't know what happened to him yet. Okay. Meanwhile, we can guess that the person sitting or lounging might be the surgeon's mate, but let's see if we can find information to confirm that before we say that for sure. We can also take note of the fact that behind the surgeon is a very familiar looking box under the bed. This is actually the box that we received the book and the memento mortem in. We also see a monkey up here. I'm also going to note, just based on this man's uniform, that we're going to guess he is an officer. We don't know which officer yet, but he's probably an officer on the ship. These guys we've already identified. We're going to look around, make sure we didn't miss any important details. We're going to walk along the carpenter's walks here. Remember, these were called carpenter's walks because they allowed the carpenter to access the outer hull. And by this machinery here is what connected the wheel to the rudder to allow the ship to be steered. And then we're going to go over this way. Anything through here? Nothing. 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 Okay. Whole lot of nothing here. There's a whole lot of nothing going on. Okay. So we're good. We're done here. Except we noticed that the Formosan passengers are on board. And this also wasn't uncommon. The East India Company, their merchant ships did carry both cargo and passengers between England and China, and for a and the Orient. And for a time, they actually had a monopoly. They were the only company trading between England and China and the Far East. Okay, and now this is the third part.
Take him to the cockpit. Get him wrapped and keep him left right.
Hit her here. One swing. Get through the skull in stone or brain. I'll cut her throat when you've done it.
Here?
Yeah. Come on before she kicks up. You all right there, sir?
What? Never been on a farm, Chuck?
Mind your shoes now.
Okay. So now here we have a scene where these three younger guys are being taught how to butcher a cow. And by the way, it's actually kind of accurate. Like, the way you butcher a cow, even still in slaughterhouses today, is you stun them with a shot to the head, to the brain, so that they don't kick and thrash around while you actually kill them. And in this case, they would kill them by slitting their throats. The person doing the stunning is called a knocker, because he knocks him in the head. Except you can see that he's actually doing it by hitting him with, I think it would be a hammer and spike, or it might be an axe or a pick. And the key was to go right through the side of the skull and into the brain. And that's your fun fact for tonight. But, so now, who are these three people? Well, there's a couple of clues. First of all, we know that the person throwing up, because we were listening to the dialogue, is a guy named Charlie. Okay? And we have a couple of different Charlies. We have a I think it would actually be Charles Minet, because he is French. But don't quote me on that, because I am not French. And we also have a Charles Hirschtick, who is a midshipman. Midshipmen were younger members of the privileged class, usually in their teenage years, who were aboard a ship, and they were being trained to be ship's officers. So they would be taught all of the different ship's functions, because they had to know how to do everything. So this is actually a training scene here, where someone is training them how to butcher a cow. And if you listen, the tradesman who's teaching them how to do the slaughtering actually calls Charlie Sir. Even though Charlie is clearly younger than him and inexperienced, because Charlie is, as a midshipman, a member of the officer class, while the guy doing the slaughtering is a tradesman. So this tells us a couple of things. First, we know this guy is Charles Hirschtick. Yeah, Rallycat is pointing out that U.S. Navy cadets are still called midshipmen. And part of it is, traditionally their cabins are even placed midships. And when we go upstairs and look at their cabin is between the front of the ship, where the seamen and the topmen were all sleeping, and then the officers' quarters at the back. They were at the midships. That also tells us that these other two kids here, are also midshipmen. And we knew one of them was a midshipman, but now we know they're all midshipmen. We don't know who is who other than Charlie. But we also know this fella's identity now. Okay? Because ships, at the time, carried butchers, like Emil O'Farrell from Ireland. And he certainly had an Irish accent, as he said, "You're right there, sir." And I can't do an Irish accent. The butcher was responsible for the ship's livestock, slaughtering them, cutting them up into meat, and then they would be prepared by the ship's cook, who we have already identified. So we know this fella is Emil O'Farrell. Okay. Meanwhile, we'll just take a little look around to see if there's any other good information in this scene that we might want to carry with us. Now, we could see the aftermath of what just happened in the surgery. There's the surgeon, again with his monkey, watching as the body is being taken away. And then if we look in the surgery, now that the body has been removed, this guy is cleaning up and making the bed. He is the balding man we saw earlier, and so now we can feel quite comfortable in saying this guy is the surgeon's mate. Remember that officers and assistants, or officers and tradesmen, had mates who basically served as their assistants on the voyage. Okay. We can also see, I like this look of concern that they have as they are watching this body being carried away, the passengers. There's a lot of really subtle characterization that happens. And I'm going to point out some of it if I can find the door back to reality. Okay. And now we're done with... Yeah, thanks. Okay. Now we're done with Chapter 2, and we go on to Chapter 3, Murder. The ship has continued its voyage, with a few less crewmen, and is now near the Canary Islands when a murder takes place. And to see the beginning of this scene, we have to go all the way back up to the deck. Wait, there should be... Right, I don't know why I'm going all the way forward. We can use the aft hatch here. Boop. Okay. So sometime after that incident, near the Canary Islands, we have this scene.
Hello? Who is there? Who is that? Is someone hurt? Signore Nichols, is that you? What are you doing down here?
Oh, hello, yes. All fine here. Just, sorting some things.
What's your step? Here, let me help you.
Okay. So this is the scene where Nunzio Pasqua, one of the passengers from Italy, is stabbed by someone named Signor Nichols. And I keep accidentally... The mouse is really sensitive, so when the book opens, it immediately goes going away from him. So we know this guy is Edward Nichols, the ship's second mate, and the English accent helps confirm that. Okay, so what was going on here, though? Alright, the Formosan guard has been knocked out. He's been clubbed. We know that's Hak Sung Lao. We're going to find that out shortly. And the door to the passenger's cargo is open. This ornate chest has been opened, and there is a glowing seashell. Okay. And based on the dialogue, we can presume that what happened was second mate Nichols came down here and was looting. He was going through the passengers' things. He suspected the Formosans had something of value. He knocked out the guard and went in there. And unfortunately for poor Nunzio Pasqua, he arrived at the wrong time, interrupted the scene, and then he was killed so that he couldn't identify Nichols. We can assume that Nichols probably crept up on Hak Sung Lao so that he wasn't seen and knocked him out. Okay, we know he didn't die, or else the pocket watch would be going crazy. And now the next scene that follows probably the next day.
Hak Sung Lao, you have been found guilty by self-confession of the murder of Nunzio Pasqua.
Quiet.
As captain of this ship, and by the authority of the East India Company, and thus the Crown of England, I sentence you to death by firing line. Mr. Wolf, when you are ready.
Right, sir. Ready, men. Aim. Fire!
Right. So Hak Sung Lao is then found guilty by self-confession of murdering Nunzio Pasqua. And that seems really odd because we're pretty sure he didn't do it. Okay? The problem is, Hak Sung Lao is a Formosan. He does not speak English. He speaks only... he would speak a dialect of Chinese called Hokkien, which is actually very different from the mainland Chinese languages. Like, at the time, it would be commonly Cantonese, and there would be some Mandarin up north of China, but the most of the crew on the ship is supposed to be speaking Cantonese. So somebody had to translate his confession. And we can assume that because of a language barrier, either a poor translation happened or a purposeful mistranslation. And we'll see more clues for that later. Now, we've already identified him, but we haven't been able to complete it because we don't actually know whose bullet shot him. And this is one of the neat puzzles because you actually have to follow the trail of the bullet back to the gun. And we know this fella is the one that fired the gun. Unfortunately, we haven't identified him yet, so we can't do anything with that information. But this is another information-rich scene. So, for example, we've got this guy. He is giving the order to fire. And in the dialogue, the captain refers to him as Mr. Wolf. So, this guy is the gunner, and it makes perfect sense because he is responsible for all the firearms on board the ship and their safe operation and returning them and keeping them locked up and stored properly would be Christian Wolf, the ship's gunner. Okay. But let's keep looking around here. Okay. Obviously, we know this guy's the captain. We have this guy. He's a guy we identified as an unknown officer already. We have this guy. That's second mate Nichols. And we have this guy. He is first mate William Hoskett. We've identified him already too. It actually isn't a crazy stretch now to say this is probably the only mate we haven't identified. Oh wait, we didn't identify the fourth mate. So he could be the third mate or the fourth mate, right? Yeah, we got... Yeah, I'm being bonkers here. That's not true. We've got three mates standing here. But next to the mates are these guys wearing uniforms that we have already identified as stewards. So even if we don't know who they are, we know they're stewards. And if we even look in the sketch here, we can even see that these four guys here, all standing back here, they're all wearing stewards' jackets. I'm going to come back to... Whoops. Yeah, and we know he's the first mate steward. Okay, I keep forgetting how to get out of it. And here we have one more steward. Okay. We're just going to use the sketch to make it easier. Okay. We also have this guy in the sketch, by the way, who is standing holding the wheel. We'll talk more about him later. Okay, because he's not actually visible. But we can actually pair up at least one steward. And we could guess if we wanted to that this might be the second mate steward, but we're not going to do that just yet. Let's see if we can find more information. Here's Lars Lind, the guy who's in 90% of the scenes, by the way. And here is Emil and the ship's cook, Thomas Sefton, I believe, watching along. Sefton always has his chef's fork in hand, as is traditional, you know, the symbol of his office. And Emil is standing here with some of the ship's livestock. Here is the sketch artist, who we already identified. And then over here, we have the Formosan passengers. And the woman was referred to as Miss Lim. Now, I mentioned last time that if you know something about Chinese naming traditions, and I don't, you actually might recognize that of the Formosan passengers, only one of them has a female name, Bun Lan Lim. I did not know that, so I just have to trust people when they tell me that. But now we know that because she's referred to as Miss Lim. We don't know who the other people are just yet. Okay. We also see, oh, here's another guy who is wearing an officer's hat. He is one of the ship's mates, right? So we can say he is definitely an officer. We may not know which one. And next to him, he also has a steward. It's a little more obvious in the actual scene. See, Also, it's kind of funny because there's a few differences from the sketch. And one of the interesting ones is that the steward here in this image, and notice he's not wearing the steward's tunic, but he has the jacket. The steward is covering his hands. This steward is particularly young compared to the other stewards. He shows up in a couple of scenes it's worth watching out for. And I can't explain why that makes sense just yet, because we don't know anything else about who he is just yet. Also, somebody is asking in the chat, which got buried again, so I'm going to move it so I can see it. The avatar is asking, so did they use so many gunmen to make sure he got killed? It seems like they wouldn't care to not know whose bullet did the deed. Actually, the reason they use numerous gunmen in firing squads traditionally is so that no one knows who actually fired the bullet or bullets that killed the person. Because when you are serving on a firing squad, you are a representative of the state. You are a representative of government justice or legal justice or what have you. And so you're not responsible. It is the government or the legal authority, in this case the captain, who is responsible. And so they're, by passing judgment. And so we diffuse the responsibility among numerous individuals. Okay. Hey, look at this guy. Now note that these two folks have Chinese appearances by their facial features and by their clothing. This guy has open-topped shoes. Isn't that interesting? Didn't we make a note about that? That number 38 has open-topped shoes. I do actually, you know what? At the end, when we do the credits, I'm gonna go through some stuff because I do have some rather particular objections to the way to the fiction of the game, and one of them has to do with the firing squad. Okay. I think we've gotten everything we're going to get out of this scene. This is another information-rich scene. We're going to be back here once we know who this guy is, so that we can make him responsible, even though the whole point of a firing squad is that no one is responsible. Justice is responsible. Our insurance paperwork is more important than justice. It is more important than morality. It is more important than God. So, we need to fill out the proper paperwork here. All right. And now we're going to move to part 3. And this is the foot. I always forget what this one is. This is the foot that's hanging outside the first mate's cabin. Okay. So this is part 3. This is still in chapter 3 murder. Chapter 3, part 3.
On your toes.
Go back quick!
Here.
Captain!
Slack the lifts and lower the boats! The whole crew will be on us!
Give it up!
Alright. Chronologically, this scene follows, and I'm going to point this out. This scene follows in pretty soon after the execution, because the body is still there. Okay. What's going on here? Okay. We can see that it looks like a couple of people are kidnapping the Formosan passengers, loading them onto the ship's 2 boats, and abandoning the ship. Okay. So here we have this unknown steward again. We know him by his uniform. We have the Formosan passenger. We have a couple other guys loading into boats. And meanwhile, we have this boat getting loaded up. Okay, we can see they're getting the boat ready to go. Who is doing this? Well, one of them is Senor Nichols. So, You know, nearly getting caught stealing from them once wasn't enough for the guy. Because now he's kidnapping and doing it again. But notice our victim is a very tattooed victim. And especially has a tattoo of a woman on his arm. And we know that that is number 37, Timothy Butamont. A topman, which also, you will notice, by the way, that the topmen are generally the ones who will be standing on the rigging or even standing on the rail. If you were a seaman, you pretty much kept your feet on the deck. Okay. Here's Lars Lind again. He got clubbed over, or, you know, he got hit during the escape. He's in like every other scene. Who is this? This is one of the poor midshipmen. And then we have this guy next to the ship's wheel. Who is also shown with his hand on the ship's wheel in the sketch. And you know what? We're gonna go ahead and call it now. Finley Dalton is only ever near the wheel. The helmsman was the only person on the ship rated to touch the ship's wheel. That's what helmsman means. So, we're calling him the helmsman. We're saying that's it. Nothing else going on. And now we end up in the one scene that we cannot work through in chronological order. Okay? Because the corpses just are not accessible. We have to work in reverse order. Okay? This is the scene that happens immediately after Nichols and his prisoners sail away from the ship. It is a chapter called The Calling. These three bodies will eventually be brought back to the ship. We're just going to have to do this one backwards. It's all we can do. Oh, I didn't mark the perp? Yeah, okay, good. Good call. I didn't blame Nichols. That's okay. We would have picked that up and cleaned up. Okay. It's okay if we miss anything now. Trust me. But we're going to try not to. Okay. So.
Ahoy! Ahoy! Wait! Don't shoot! I have treasure! I yield!
Hold your fire!
Alright. So, at the end of his attempt to steal the Formosan's treasure and kidnap the royals, Senor Nichols comes back to the ship, because it has gone bad, and while he is trying to bribe his way back on board the ship, he is shot by one of the other Formosan guard who we cannot identify yet. Okay. And he is the only one on the boats now, though we can see he has Miss Lim, the female Formosan passenger. He has a couple of mermaids, one of whom seems to have a magic shell, because it's glowing, and shells don't normally glow. They have the chest, and they have the other Formosan royal. There's also this guy looking out the window. And if we look at the deck map, the deck plan here, to see where we're at. Okay. Now we are standing level with the Orlop deck. Remember, the Orlop deck is the deck that is level with the water level. But the window directly above us is the window to the fourth mate's cabin. We could also count from the back, because there are no windows down on the Orlop deck because of what with it being, you know, at water level. That's kind of dangerous. So this fella is in the fourth mate's cabin. Why would he be in the fourth mate's cabin? Because this unknown officer is fourth mate John Davies. If we wanted to, we could now go ahead and say this steward that is with him is probably the fourth mate steward. You know, they were standing next to each other on the deck, and each of the mates had a steward with him. Each mate had a steward that was like his assistant. We'll hold off on that, but we will keep an eye on him, because the fourth mate and his steward, the fourth mate's awesome. Like, he's very unappreciated. And his relationship with the steward is very nice. Okay. Because I did promise, even though I'm going through this in order and we're going to pretend that we're just going to solve things in the order that we can, I'm also going to try and point things out as we go that are of particular fun interest, which does require me to admit that I know stuff. Okay, this is the scene where we identified that the Formosan Royal was burned to death. The shell is missing from the chest, and there is fire coming out of the chest. I'll have things to say about that afterwards, when we're in the epilogue, about the whole chest thing. But Nichols is the only one left alive. He is pulling the mermaids onto the boats. He has tied the boats together. And also, the Formosan Royal identified her as Miss Lim. So if we missed it the last time, or if we were coming at this from, the beginning, we would now be able to identify her. But we're now just going to move back in time and watch what happened immediately before that. Okay. So in this previous scene, we see the Formosan Royal. He is plunging something into the top of the chest. Lightning is shooting out, killing, except we know they're not killed, we know they're stunned, stunning the mermaids. We can see this guy's been speared. There's another guy on the boat. He's got a knife through him. And Miss Lim is here. This is the scene where she died, but it's not really clear how she died, unless you look very closely at her face. I mean, her body is bloodied, but her face has claw marks. But it'll be more obvious in another scene how she died. Okay. So meanwhile, we're going to go back one scene, I think. Where are we in? We're in 4-4. So we want to go back to 4-3. So, and because these bodies are only accessible like this, we can't go forward through the scene.
You still breathing? Can you roll? Nichols, sir, shoot them for God's sake!
Alright, if we didn't know Nichols was in the scene, we know he is now because someone referred to him by name. We can actually see what Nichols is doing. He is bravely hiding while the crew is being attacked by these mer people. Okay, here is where we can see clearly what happened to... Whoops. What happened to Bunlan Lim. She was clawed by a terrible beast. We can see her being clawed. I think the game will also accept strangled. We can see this guy here, and we might also notice on the floor of the boat there is a distinct satchel. We don't know who it belongs to, but somebody has that satchel. We have a speared guy. And also, this is one that's really hard to see. But this guy here, who we saw him dead in the previous scene, and he had a knife stuck through him, this is where the Formosan Royal is killing him with a knife. Okay. Alright. So now, next is the steward's death, which is he was knifed. Wait a minute. Nope. I can't... Oh, no, that's one. It's a pain in the ass trying to remember which person died when. Here we go. Okay.
Keep rowing!
Where is it? There! Something there!
I see it!
Give us a weapon!
Shoot! My kid eye! Pick up the oars and row, you fools!
Alright. The dialogue now gives us the name of the Formosan Royal. Okay? Because Miss Lim referred to him as Bang. Okay. And here we can see, by the way, he's freeing himself. He was tied up, and he's now using one of the mermaid's spears to free himself. Okay? So we're going to pop to the book here just to do this the quick and easy way. Okay. Since we can. Okay. First, we know that this is It Bang Sa, I believe is his name. Yeah, It Bang Sa. Because he was identified by dialogue. Now again, I don't want to get too distracted bouncing around in the scenes and then identifying everything we can, so we're just going to leave everything else alone for now. Cleaning up is actually really easy and we can do most of it with the book. Okay, but here we have this guy. He's being dragged off the boat. There's Nichols. He had a gun and he was cowering instead of shooting. Here's a guy getting speared. And... hey, this guy has a pipe in his mouth. Distinct satchel, pipe. We have already identified this person. We know that he is number 47, Alexei Toporov. Who, interestingly enough, was voiced by the director of the guy who did the movie adaptation of Lucas Pope's previous game, Papers, Please. Fun fact. Alright. And then we should have one more death here, though. I really hate... you know what? I'm not going to keep saying this every time, but really, I'm struggling so much with the... okay. So... this is the last body in this scene. And I hate this chapter. This chapter is the absolute worst. Because you can't do it in order. But we can kind of reconstruct events. Not that it's very complicated.
Keep course due east. We'll reach the Canaries in 3 days. You packed enough stores?
Aye, sir. Checked and loaded them myself.
Good. Stay quiet and alert. If the wind picks up, we've no chance against the Obra Dinn.
休假，你玩抓不？我冇问题，但是伊来想啊，绝对袂当互伊落在水底。
那是遐个怪物出现，你绝对卖起来。
Aye, shut it up.
They say strange things about monsters.
Okay, so this is where, by the way, we get the first indication that the Chinese crewmen can, or at least some of the Chinese crewmen can kind of translate, but not completely. Because he didn't understand quite what the two folks were saying, just that they're saying strange things about monsters. Okay. And then we can see he gets speared. Bang narrowly misses getting speared. And then he's going to use the spear to cut himself free. So, Nichols and various crewmen kidnapped the two Formosan royals and stole their chest, got them on lifeboats, and started rowing east for the Canary Islands, hoping to, you know, make a score. They were talking about how if the chest touches the ocean, monsters will come. And then monsters came. Started spearing various people until Bang finally freed himself, opened the chest, and used its magic to make lightning kill the mermaids. Nichols then rows back to the Obra Dinn, tries to bribe his way back on board, saying, I have treasure, I'm back. And then he is shot by the Formosan guard. There's also one little bit of interesting dialogue that I forgot to point out. It's another one of those little bits of bonus language content. If you know Chinese, apparently Miss Lim refers to Bang as her uncle. So she is the niece of the Formosan royal. Okay. And that ends the calling. And the reason why it is called the calling is because it is what summoned the mermaids. Okay. And now, I know there's some information that we just kind of missed out on, but that's okay. We're going to clean it up. It's going to be easy. Trust me. Now we go to the next scene, Unholy Captives. Which should be here? Here. Yep. And now we're back in normal time. 5-1. Chapter 5, Part 1.
What the hell is going on? What do you know about these things? About the chest and your dead friends?
这是虾米？未来全部供出来。
拢是恁害啦！迄个海里较必然无顾好，是让人晕死的啊！
He talk about a shell. Very dangerous.
Shell? What shell?
Okay. So, Nichols was shot. He's dead. They're pulling the boats back on board, taking the treasure chest, taking the mermaids. We see the surgeon and his mate are tending to the bodies. The captain, meanwhile, is interrogating the remaining Formosan guard. And one of the Chinese topmen is translating when the Chinese topman there is translating. When the stun wears off the mermaid and the mermaid launches spikes, just narrowly missing the captain, narrowly missing this dude, who I think we have already identified him. We know this guy is the bosun, Alfred Klestel. And you can see he's wearing his bosun's pipe, which I pointed out in the first scene. And he narrowly avoids getting spiked. And we can also see this guy is very concerned for Klestel. And I know why that is. Alright, so I'm going to give it away. Just so, because I want to really be able to point out the good stuff without having to go through every scene a third time. Okay. I'm not going to reveal it yet. Just take note of the guy's concern. Okay. These guys are hauling. They're using a capstan to lift, in this case, the mermaid, while this guy is guiding it on deck. So if we haven't already identified these guys... Oh, and here's Lars Lind again. Okay. So if we haven't identified these people yet, we know... Because, again, they're doing lifting and hauling work. They're seamen. And we don't want to miss noting people's jobs. Okay? He's already... Oh, he's Abraham Akbar. He's Lars Lind. This guy is helping with the hauling, so we're going to guess he's probably a seaman, too. He's pulling on a rope, he's hauling. You know? These guys, we can't really identify... Oh, we can identify them. Again, moving cargo around. That's seaman's work. Can I get the guy behind him? Oh, wait. Yeah, maybe? Yeah, I can. Get the guy behind him. He's already a seaman. Okay. We've probably flagged all the seamen. It's cool. Can't tell what this guy is doing. He could be a seaman, or he could be just watching, and he has a hand on the... Okay. Yeah. So, that's enough for now. Okay. Alright. So then the story continues, and this is where I kind of lose track of where we go from here. Oh, okay. So now they are bringing the... This is the death of Thomas Sefton, the dumbass. Ship moron. I think this is him, right? 5'2". Yeah, Thomas Sefton. This guy's an ass.
Clear the deck. Move the boats astern and throw the bodies over.
Captain?
Hey there, what's this? Give them to me and I can fry us a solid meal, boys.
Have 'em now. Take it slow.
One sec, gentlemen. There's a free shell here. Let's have a look.
No, get back.
Alright, so Thomas Sefton, the cook, he was prodding at the one of the stunned mermaids, gets himself killed. Meanwhile, up on deck, so this follows immediately from the previous scene. Okay? I like that the ship's surgeon is looking at the spite like, oh, well, this is an interesting thing that's going on here. And the ship's surgeon, or the surgeon's mate, always has this look of like, I just cannot be bothered with this shit. Okay, I don't know who that guy is. He's a seaman. He's the seaman who shoots Oxeng Lao. I think at this point I've identified all of the seamen, so we're not gonna bother with that. The captain is talking to his officers, including, if we hadn't identified him already, the guy holding the gun is the ship's gunner. Okay, and we got people moving cargo. Okay. Meanwhile, here's an interesting one. This guy is panicked by the mermaids, and he's booking it. He does not like this. The three midshipmen are kind of hanging out together, discussing what's going on. I like their camaraderie. They have really good chemistry. And you know what? That's it. There's really not much else to get from this scene. Oh wait, there's one other little thing. These two guys are stewards. So we have an unknown steward, and then we have this young steward here just hanging out in the kitchen, or in the mess, doing, or galley, whatever it is, doing steward things. The next scene's actually also not going to give us too much information, but we have to do it for completeness. And it follows like 1 second later, because as a result of Thomas Sefton's dumbassitude, they lose the grip, you know, they trip, they go falling down the stairs. The guy's head is crushed. And that is how he died. Unfortunately, we cannot blame Thomas Sefton on the paperwork. We have this guy, who we don't know who he is, but he has a nice ascot. Here's the guy who was panicked by the mermaid, now fleeing in the other direction. Oh no, wait, I'm sorry, that's the artist. That's Edward Spratt. Here's the butcher, Emil. And I don't think we can get upstairs, but meanwhile, coming out of the carpenter's shop, we have 2 people. Now, I'm going to go ahead and flag them. We know one of them is the carpenter, and one of them is the carpenter's mate, because that's who they're going to be. But we don't know which one is which. It does bug me a little bit that this game does not distinguish between officers and tradesmen because they are different. But for now, I'm going to flag them as officers. Because we're going to want to know... Because we're going to want to remember that these 2 people are tradesmen. In this case, they're carpenters. We just don't know which is which. Other than that, not really too much information to be gleaned from this scene. Rallycat is reminding us that if you don't know who the ship's moron is, that is a good line. Okay, so now we need 5-4. And I think... sorry, I have to go... Chapter 5... 2, 3... Part 3... Part 4. Okay. Remember the panicky guy running away? Okay.
Keep pressure here.
Hold him down. What madness is this? 20 years my steward had never a doubt on your sanity. Explain yourself.
Those ungodly beasts carry a curse! Throw them back or doom us all!
Tie him up and put him in the lazarette with those things. He may yet find his senses.
I think we talked about it last time, but the lazarette is a storage chamber at the rear of the ship. It was normally used to keep extra supplies like lines, sails, and things. And often it was used to store bodies that needed to be brought back that could be buried at sea. Okay. In this scene, the captain's steward, this guy who is being dragged away, I think we identified him last time, but we didn't. Okay. The captain is talking to his steward, Philip Dolly, saying, "You've been my steward for 20 years. You never went nuts before. What's going on?" So we know that guy being dragged away is the steward. I think we already identified the victim here, especially because the game is not making it easy for me to just... Whoops. Okay. 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 Refers to him as John. Okay. There were 2 Johns on the ship. This is why we couldn't identify him. The surgeon says, you're going to be fine, John. We've been in worse problems than this. And then immediately says, wait, where's the rest of his leg? Like, which is not super comforting. We know he's not John Davies, the 4th mate, because we already know who John Davies is. So he must be the other John, John Naples, a seaman from Wales. And we know he was sworded to death by Philip Dahl, the captain's steward. One other little detail is this fella is the bosun. We can sort of see his pipe. We know who he is. He's coming out of the bosun's store, which only he would have access to. And then we see his buddy, this stripy shirted seaman, who is dragging the body away. Upstairs, Edward Spratt and Emil O'Farrell want to go downstairs and see what's going on. Here, this is an interesting little detail. But this guy is wearing a gun. And nobody else is armed in the scene because the ship is not currently under attack. They've taken on some prisoners, but the ship's not currently in danger. So the only people who would be running around with guns at this point would be the gunner and the gunner's mate. We already identified the gunner, so we could actually guess that guy might be the gunner's mate. But that's not a very positive identification just yet. The carpenters have brought a stretcher to take away the guy who got his head broken. This officer is directing the seaman to bring the chest down. We've already kind of identified them. There's our buddy Lars. Take a shot. And that's it. That's it for this scene. But the gun is a neat little detail. Like I said, Lucas Pope did a lot of homework. Where is the door back to... Oh, I gotta go all the way around. I wish the spectral memories of people's deaths could get out of my way. Lucas Pope did his homework, and he was really careful to make sure that people were where they belonged. Because you need to be able to use that information. Okay. Shortly after the mermaids have been incarcerated in the ship's lazarette, I always lose track of the fact there's a ladder right here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Shortly after, I'm going to skip the dialogue. Well, oh, I didn't need to. Okay. Shortly after the mermaids have been incarcerated, a storm blows up. The ship's crew has to secure the sails. You can't leave the sails furled during open during a storm. Otherwise, the storm will tear them up. So the topmen are up here, working in the riggings, doing what they've got to do. While down below on the deck, you can see the seamen are hauling up the sails. So they haul up the sails, and the topmen tie off the sails. You can see how this sail has been tied up. The seamen are hauling the next sail, and the topmen will climb up. Okay. We can also see already that the crab monsters are now boarding the ship. As the storm arose, the crab monsters came on board. Now, we've already identified this guy, I believe, because we knew he had those shoes. But everybody we see up here, we know is a topman. No one else would be up in the rigging. So we can flag all of our peoples as topmen. This is another information-rich scene because it tells you all of these people, their position on the ship. But actually, this guy, we have an even better identity because he's wearing laced-up sandally shoes. So he is not just any topman. He is laced sandals topman, or number 39, Ji Zhang. Forgive my pronunciation. All right, let's make sure we get the other topmen here because we're going to want to know who these people are. Right? Okay. And this guy, he is a topman. You know, we don't necessarily know who everybody is, but we know their jobs now. Okay. This guy's hard to get. Okay. Now, if we wanted to, we actually could make some guesses based on appearances. Like this guy in a turban with facial hair, he definitely has the look of a Persian, someone from the Middle East. This guy, he is a topman. He is covered with tattoos, a tradition that was common in New Guinea and the islands of the Indian Ocean in the South Pacific. We could guess that, but maybe we'll have a better positive identification. Because remember, we don't want to make any guesses until we absolutely have to. Okay. Alright. Immediately thereafter, where's Nick? Nick is here. Immediately thereafter, the crabs board the ship. One of them stabs this guy, who we have already identified as Nick Botterill. I think Nick Botterill. Yeah, Nicholas Botterill. He's one of the topmen. He's identified by dialogue in the next scene. Here's Lars. Hello, Lars. Here is our unfortunate electrocuted topman and another crab soldier. We could go ahead now, and I'm pretty sure at this point, every one of these people now we have flagged as... Oh, we haven't flagged him as a seaman yet. These are the people who are on the deck doing all the hauling. Right? So, at this point, I think we've flagged pretty much every seaman that's on the ship. If we haven't, you know, that's what cleanup's for. And there's that seaman. Okay. So, nothing really interesting to discover in this scene. It's just a perfectly normal scene of giant spider crabs with kelp-shrouded riders boarding a ship and spearing the crew. Okay. Which then carries us down to... I just need to remember, where are we? We're at 6.2. So we need to go to chapter 6.3, which is going to be... It's cannon in the way. 6.3. It's this guy.
What's going on?
My vest.
Stay back.
Sorry.
It's already going to Nick.
Hey! Come on, boss! No, get there! Hey! Cats!
Okay. So the first thing we see are these two guys here. Okay. Guy throws an axe. The other guy says, no, get down. The guy who is being killed, the guy who's being spiked, says, come on, boss, and throws an axe, and the other guy says, no, get down. We might notice they have distinctly American accents. And we might also notice that we identified these guys as unknown officers because they were in the carpentry earlier. That's why we flagged them as officers. The guy who is getting killed refers to the other one as boss, meaning he's the carpenter's mate, Marcus Gibbs, an American. I absolutely love the sound design, especially that little ditty. It never gets old when you get that sound if you've correctly identified 3 people. But I love how the book typesets itself on the beat and the lines on the little clock are filled in on the beat. People have also pointed out that they absolutely love the music. Like, the music in this chapter, Soldiers of the Sea, is really an awesome piece. This is Winston Smith, a carpenter from America. A lot has been made in the... Like, he's a black man, and a lot has been made of the fact that he's an American, and, you know, it was 1803, so he must have been an escaped slave or something. And people forget that there were African Americans living in America, particularly in the northern states, who were not slaves. So a whole lot has been made out of this guy, and what was an American slave doing on a British ship? He must have escaped slaves. It's like, no, it's not necessarily. We're reading a lot into this. Here's Lars again. We're just going to call out Lars. And here's one I particularly like. Okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. Matthew Austin is saying Lucas Pope wrote all the music. So this is the guy I identified as I said, is probably the 4th mate steward, who is hiding. And the 4th mate is standing in protection of his steward. Because his steward was just a servant, and his steward's a kid. He's got the youngest steward on the crew. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and just positively say, yeah, this is definitely the 4th mate steward. It is unquestionable. They're standing together. He's defending him. So where is 4th mate steward Davy James? You know what? Okay, see, and I'm going to point out BC 56. I'm going to point out again that technically it's a little bit of a digression from history what this game is doing, because a tradesman is not an officer. Officers and tradesmen are different classes. Technically, the carpenter and the carpenter's mate are tradesmen, not officers. So, the game lumps them together. That's not accurate. I did say that in the previous scene, so... You know. So what's happening now is I've lost the door back to real life. I am trapped in time. I've lost the door to the present. Really? Where? Is it through? Oh, is it back? How the hell did I do this? We're stuck here forever. We'll have to. Why is it up on the deck? I pinged in below, or I teleported in below decks. Alright. So then we move on to Soldiers of the Sea Part 4. which should be immediately down the ladder, we're going to find 2 corpses. The crab riders continue rampaging through the ship. The captain indicated that they are making for the lazarette, which is why that they're heading down the ship. The dialogue here is not super important, so I'm going to skip it. Okay. We have no way of identifying these people. We don't know who they are. But here's the ship's butcher, standing in defense, Emil. In reality, we will see that this fence is broken, and this is where it gets broken. Because the 2 midshipmen have armed themselves with swords and are fighting the crab monster, while the 3rd midshipman is setting it on fire. Because the midshipmen are friggin' awesome. Okay. Meanwhile, we've got, that's Hosket, the first mate. There's another crab rider already coming down. There's our 4th mate. I totally forgot that this guy was... So here's an interesting thing. The carpenter got spiked. Okay, and then this other guy dragged him away. But the carpenter is not dead. Okay. Meanwhile, what else might be going on down here? Well, here's our friend the bosun. And here's this guy who is looking again at the bosun. This guy, this mysterious seaman, only has eyes for the bosun. And some of you in the chat already know why, but I'm going to tell the story later. This guy is doing what he was told to do. He's securing the lazarette, or he's securing the lower hold. And meanwhile, if we hadn't already figured it out, this is Mr. Wolf, the gunner, and he is doing what the gunner does, unlocking the gunner's store and handing out guns. Okay. Not a whole lot else going on here. Okay. We then move forward. I think the next death is going to be... Oh, I forgot. I keep forgetting what chapter we're... So we're in Soldiers of the Sea. Charles Hershtick. So 5... I can't... So 6-5. That's not right. Charlie... Oh, Charlie the midship... Oh, he's one deck below. Right, he's down on the orlop deck. Or am I... Nope, this is the cargo deck. I've lost it. I'm at the wrong end of the ship is the problem. Charlie Hershtick burns to death here with a crab rider. I'm gonna go ahead and skip the dialogue again because we basically know what happens. This is the saga of the midshipmen continues because the midshipmen were fighting the crab monster. Charlie is killed when the crab monster is set on fire trying to strangle it while another midshipman is stabbing him. The 3rd midshipman is here watching Charlie burn to death. And he is very upset by this. Which makes sense, but still. I'm very invested in the midshipmen. They're my favorite characters. Meanwhile, here's Stripey Seaman and Hosket. Emil Farrell is getting spiked. He's going to be the next death. The surgeon has come out to join the fight, and people are coming down from below decks, including the guy who is helping the surgeon, or the carpenter, and the carpenter. This guy, our unknown steward, is dragging himself away. And we're going to go ahead and just peer through the walks, or go through the carpenter's walk, and just check it out. Because there's a guy in a cabin here. And if we look on the map, we are standing outside the purser's office. As I said, the purser is the ship's accountant. He also would maintain a store where he would sell personal effects to the crew. They could use their money to buy, little things like decks of cards and extra blankets and concertinas and things. So the guy in the purser's office is the purser. He hears the terrible commotion going on and wants no part of it, because crediting and debiting did not prepare him for kelp-shrouded crab riders. BC-56 also pointed out that the crab riders have legs, indicating that they are not mermaids. Which is true. They do have legs. There's nothing down this way, so we're not, Just to move this along, I'm gonna, we're gonna be careful about scouring. You're gonna have to trust me when I say, if we go this way, we will find nothing. Gamboy 712 is saying, oh, that's sneaky. What's sneaky? That the purser is hiding? Yeah. Okay. Soon thereafter, in the same fight,
I've got you.
Emil O'Farrell is spiked to the wall. He was actually spiked in the previous scene, but it took a little while to, it took a few moments for him to pass. The surgeon is trying to help him. We now see the bosun is handing off the musket to the carpenter. The midshipman is extinguishing the fire that claimed Charlie. The other midshipman is in anguish. There's another way to identify the purser that is just not as strong, but it does exist. We can't get above decks. We can watch our mysterious steward continue to drag himself away, having been spiked in the incident. He extracted the spike and left it here, actually. But again, there's, this is a complex scene. There's a lot going on, but it's not information rich. Okay. And then finally, we have the final scene here, where our unknown steward is dragging himself along the walk. He is shot as one of the crewmen takes a shot at the crab monster. We cannot isolate him with the zoom feature, but we can see that it is the bald, white pants, light, stripy shirt-wearing guy. That seaman that we've been following. We might also notice that that guy there is wielding a scimitar. Okay? And if we go back and we trace him through the scenes, he's the guy that we had already guessed is probably the Persian topman, Omid Ghul. We can also see two people in the gunner's store. One we've identified as Mr. Wolf the gunner. The only other person who could be in the gunner's store would be the gunner's mate, Olus Wader. So if we hadn't identified him by the fact that he's armed, we now know that he is the gunner's mate. Alright. See what I mean? Like, you just deliberately going through this, you can get through a lot of information. Okay. The final death, which we will watch merely for completeness as the crew continues to fight off the crab riders successfully, because they have now killed this crab rider, and down here on, I think where it's going to be in the starboard storeroom here. I think this is the starboard bosun's store. Game Boy 712 is saying, was there a scimitar? Not in Chapter 2, but there is a sword. You're skipping ahead. It's visible in the dune. But, yeah, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay, so here we have the Carpenter, another hero of the game, being speared to death by the final crab rider, and while he does so, blasting it with a musket, finishing it off. I'm caught up on his claws. Meanwhile, here we have another topman with a... See, this is not a scimitar. Okay, it is a backsword. It is a single-edged curved sword, but not a scimitar. And we have this guy. He is a seaman. Also note that the non-officers don't use firearms. There's really not much other information going on. I do like the one guy, you know, fighting, you know, spearing it from under the... Like, this crab rider has made a mistake. This crab rider is getting blasted, speared. Yeah, that crab rider had a bad day. The crab riders have now been finished off. And then we move on immediately to the next chapter, The Doom. Okay. The crab riders have been killed. Their bodies have been stored on the ship or thrown overboard. And following that incident... Is that right? No, it's this guy. Here is Lars Lind's last scene.
Let me on. Over my dead body, you bloody Dane. Huh? How's that?
There's no cause for trouble, boys. Get in the boat.
Thought I'd forget. You killed my brother. What? That was an accident. The ropes.
It wasn't his fault. I saw the whole thing.
Lies. I shouldn't have waited so long.
No, don't.
Hey, BC56, please, I know that you've played through this game completely, and I know that I'm giving a lot of information, but I am still trying to only give information as it becomes available, unless it's something that I think is important. You're kind of violating the no spoilers request at this point. Alright, so, you know, I know you played the game and you're really excited that you played the game, but, you know, save the discussions for another channel or another time. Okay. So Lars Lind is getting killed. He is being blamed by the death of the one Peters brother that we started the game at, or started this whole story at, being killed by the other Peters brother. We still don't know which Peters brother that is. This guy here, though, is Duncan McKay. We identified him as the ship's purser. And you might notice that he is carrying a bunch of ledger books. These folks have had enough. After the mermaids, the storm, the crab riders, they have decided that they're commandeering one of the boats. They are abandoning the ship. Lars Lind wants to join them. Mr. Peters, angry at Lars Lind over the death of his brother, is killing him. While the other seaman is insisting that it was an accident. And that's all we got from this scene, except... it wasn't necessary for you to remove the offending comments. I'm just asking you to just cool it a bit on the game discussion. We're almost through it now. We're at the Doom. Now we're at Doom 2, which we will remember as the poop scene. On the poop deck. Already talked about this in the seats of ease and what have you. Yeah, it is really hard to blame them for wanting to leave. I don't. We're going to skip the poop. Okay, at this point, meanwhile, Edward Spratt, the ship's artist, was relieving himself. Meanwhile, this guy, who we've identified as the first mate steward, is preparing a meal. Okay. We have another scene of life. Oh yeah, well, it was actually a scimitar. So if we hadn't already identified him... See, now, that's the... Like, I could not remember whether it was the whether it was the scimitar or it was the backsword. But you are right, it is the scimitar. So if we hadn't already identified our Persian friend as Omid Ghul, crewman number 36, we would know him now by his scimitar. Okay. We also have a couple of missing empty hammocks. 48 and 49 are empty. And we might wonder, who are crewmen 48 and 49? Except I can't get back to... Okay. Probably they're the people up who were on deck on the previous scene, but we can't be sure of that. They might be other people wandering around. Oh, wait! One of them is Nathan Peters. And we've been trying to identify which Peters brother was in the previous scene. Well, the other Peters brother, Samuel Peters, he's dead. Probably doesn't have a hammock. So we can actually go ahead now, and we're going to go and do this. So we know a few things. We know Lars Lind was clubbed to death by Nathan Peters. We could go back and flag Peters in the previous scene, but we don't have to do that. We'll come back for him. Okay, Omid Gul is floating around somewhere. And then the other guy was... We don't know where he is. He could be up on deck. Here's another interesting one. We have one of our Chinese topmen sitting with this non-Chinese guy. I don't know if that's racist, but he's not Chinese. Is it racist to say that? I don't know. He is an unknown seaman. Okay? Our Chinese seaman is sitting next to a hammock, and the hammock number is 41. And if we remember, 41 is the number of one of the Chinese topmen. So probably this is Wei Li. We don't know who this guy is sitting with Wei Li, but we might have a suspicion because we did know that one of the English seamen hangs out with the Chinese topmen and sleeps with the sleeps in the same alcove as he doesn't sleep with the Chinese topmen. And he sleeps in the same alcove, which is in fact this particular alcove. If we pulled up the map, it would coordinate with the previous, it would line up with the previous scene, telling us this guy is number 59, George Shirley, friend to the Chinese topman. Okay. We have this guy, who we have identified only as an officer, and we have this guy, who we know is a steward. If we knew which officer this was, we would know which steward is walking along with him bringing a meal. Okay. We have X, that's Ahmed Akbar. He is sleeping over here. The rest of his friends have passed at this point. We have 57. I know I look like I don't know how to play this game every time I do this, but the crew. 57. Who's 57? Okay. 57 is Alexander Booth, an English seaman. Could be drifting around somewhere. Could be one of the seamen up on deck. We know 56 is not up on deck. Because remember, there's another seaman up on deck with Lars Lind and Samuel Peters. And then Alexander Booth. This is Henry Brennan, who we haven't identified yet. This is 45. And I know this might not be important information, but we want to make sure. Alexei Toporov. Oh, Leonid Volkov, the Russian topman. Okay, and then we have over here 43 and 44. This is actually an interesting thing because this tells us who's still alive at this point, which is Maba and Lewis Walker, who are two more topmen, including the... Okay. Then all hell breaks loose. And I have to get back to reality, is what I have to do. Okay. Right, okay. So that was 6-2? 7-2. Okay. 7-3, I believe, is going to be... Nope. 7-3... That's 7-4. Body under the cannon. 7-5. Where's 7-3? Damn it! Who is 7-3? Okay. Admiral Akbar. I'm Abraham Akbar. That, you know, I have been saying the whole time, don't say Admiral Akbar. Don't say Admiral Akbar. Don't say Admiral Akbar. It's been running through my head the whole time. This should be him. Oh no, he's this guy. He's impossible to find. That's where he is. Okay. Yeah, it's the whole time. I've been like, don't say Admiral Akbar. Don't say Admiral Akbar. Okay. So here, the ship has now mounted a defense. The Kraken has made its presence known, crushing Edward Spratt, and attacking the ship. The gunner has taken command of the gunner's deck, of the gun deck, and is ordering the crewmen to fire. We can see that the current crew is opening fire. This cannon was about to be lit. Akbar had the had what's called the spark, a punk or a match that he was going to light the cannon with, and then the tentacle reached through the cannon, or reached through the gun port, crushed him, and also pinned the gunner up to the cannon, while this other fellow, which is George Shirley, is bracing in the window. That's going to be important in a second. There's not a whole lot of... I mean, there's a lot going on now in the story, but there's not actually a lot of information going on in this scene other than that moment. Because it's really the next moment that is important. Because a moment later, Akbar, with the lit fuse, accidentally, in his death throes, lights the cannon. Okay. The ship, the gunner, Christian Wolf, was blasted by a cannon. Okay. Shot cannon. And the cannon was lit by Seaman Akbar. Okay. All right. George Shirley, meanwhile, we know he is... I wish it wouldn't go... I honestly wish it wouldn't go right to the queue. I really do wish it wouldn't go right to the sketch. I wish it would go to the page. Okay. George Shirley is nowhere to be seen. The last we saw him, he was braced in the window when the cannon went off. We have to conclude that he was blasted overboard. We could say he was killed by a cannon. He was shot by a cannon. The game will accept that. The game will also accept that he fell overboard. The game will accept that he was drowned by a beast. But I'm saying he fell overboard. That is how I'm choosing to interpret the scene. Meanwhile, the other guys are still cannoning away. Okay. Rallycat says I was waiting. Yeah, everybody was waiting for the Admiral Akbar slip. Okay. Yep. Now we have the unknown steward. Okay. So one of the in the chaos, now the cannon was blasted through the wall, another cannon has come loose, and as the ship is rocking back and forth, the cannon has come loose and is crushing this unknown steward, who we know is this officer's steward. And once again, we see that the officers are rather protective of their stewards. Because here now is the officer that we think belongs to that steward, leaping over the benches to try and rescue his steward from being crushed. We can also see this fella is very upset about what's going on here. I think we can now get above decks. Oh, here's the other thing. We can also see the two midshipmen. They have grabbed bags of powder shot, charges that would be used to fire the cannons, and they're rushing up on deck. We'll join them in a moment. Yeah, the Avatar is talking about the music being very reminiscent of adventure games of the day, because it was the era of like the multimedia CD-ROM game. Okay. And you would have these short CD quality audio clips. They were short, so they were either looped or they would just play once, because storage media was not what it was now. But it was like the first time you were getting CD quality music in video games. I think this is him. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, again I'm skipping the dialogue. The dialogue tells us we have our two midshipmen here. They are throwing powder charges at the Kraken. One of them has a charge in hand. It is lit when the Kraken grabs hold of him. They have lashed themselves together so that they can keep each other from being swept overboard. And he was grabbed, and the dialogue is the other midshipman is saying, "Throw the powder," and he can't throw the powder away before it goes off, blowing him up. We've already identified him. Here is who the topman. This is the gunner's mate. The gunner is now dead. He died in the previous scene. So if we hadn't yet identified the gunner's mate, he's the only one left on board handling firearms. Except, as was pointed out, the one scene where you will see non-officers handling guns was when they were in the firing squad, which was normal, and they were under the command of the gunner. Likewise, when they're firing the cannons, they're under the command of the gunner. Okay. Here we have this guy falling off the rigging. He is a guy we could have identified by his sword or his nationality. This is Omid Ghul. And we now know what happened to him. He fell overboard. We've spotted him. There he goes. He was in the riggings when the Kraken attacked. Nothing else to take note of in this scene. The rest of the battle will play out. Okay. Next scene is this unknown topman. Nope. We're just looking for half a body. Here it is. This unknown topman who was torn apart. There's no important dialogue here. We've been following this guy. He's torn apart, fighting the Kraken. Okay. Meanwhile, the gunner's mate is tossing a rifle to the bosun. The bosun, who is basically in basically every fight. The bosun is there. Okay. Meanwhile, the stripy-shirted seaman is here, also fighting. We have this guy. He's one of the Chinese topmen. He has a powder charge. So he's getting ready to fight. And there's an interesting thing. There appears to be a lifeboat with 3 people falling out of it. We know 3 people got into a lifeboat. Here we have the exploded midshipman, and again the anguished remaining midshipman, who has now seen 2 of his fellows die. This guy here, who is the 4th mate, who also, like the officers in this, they were in every fight, as they should be. You know, it's their job to protect the ship and crew. Gonna have a lot to say at the end, because people really, like, they get down on the officers, especially the captain. And I have a case that the captain did nothing wrong. Okay. To continue the story now, we have to go to Abigail's body. Abigail was the wife of the captain. After she died, she was moved into her berth in the captain's cabin. Gonna let her dialogue play. Okay. We've already identified her. We declared her as crushed by falling rigging. If we had any doubts about who this officer is, the fact that she calls him Martin gives us a positive identity. He is the 3rd mate, Martin Perrott. Okay. Here we see again the bosun and the stripy-shirted seaman fighting until the very end. Now, we weren't actually sure what happened to the bosun. We do know that he was torn apart, but because we found him later without an arm. But we don't know what tore him apart. Well, we can now say with certainty, for what that's worth, that he was torn apart by a kraken. Okay. Which, or also a terrible beast. Okay. Okay. Alright. Here is a fellow topman helping what's left of Maba. Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't positively identified him. Gunner's mate, still fighting. Who's that up there? Why, it appears to be our helmsman, Finley Dalton, being dragged off the ship by a kraken. We can say several things. We can say he was pulled overboard, fell overboard. We can say he was drowned by a beast. We could even, I think, say he was crushed by the kraken. Okay, but he's being pulled off the ship from the ship's wheel. 3rd time we've seen him at the helm. And last time we'll see him at the helm. We can't get up here. We see this guy, first mate steward Paul Moss, and we see the ship's 2 female passengers. Okay, the 2 female passengers who are not who's not the Formosan Royal. Okay. The ship has 2 female passengers on there. There's a Miss Jane Bird, and there is a Emily Jackson, I think her name is. The question of how we tell them apart. I'm going to confess, when I did this, I actually did not notice the detail I'm using now. I used a little bit more spotty reasoning. I reasoned this. The woman who is referred to as Miss is an unmarried woman. And so she would be the younger of the 2 women. Okay. Now, that does not take into account spinsters. And I actually assumed they were traveling together because an unmarried woman would not travel alone. She would have someone along with her, a governess or the like. and so she would be referred to as Miss. So I decided the younger woman was Miss Jane Bird. I did not notice that this other woman, the older woman, is wearing a wedding ring on the ring finger of her left hand, positively suggesting or positively stating that she is the married one and therefore would not be referred to as Miss. So she is Emily Jackson, and her companion must be Miss Jane Bird. Okay. This wraps up the Doom chapter. Okay. The ship has been attacked by a Kraken. Okay. And now, the next place we have to go is to the bargain. Except, we're not allowed to know about the bargain. Not until we finish the mystery. So we have to pick up this story down in the officers' quarters where the ship's bosun yeah.
Put me down. Let go.
Easy now. You're in a bad way.
Is the squid? Where is my Frenchman?
The squid's gone. Your mate was torn apart.
The the beast is dead. How? How did you kill it?
He didn't. It left with the storm. Captain came up from the hold. Said he chased it off. You should rest.
A curse like that does not live for nothing.
Oh man, without the headphones I never noticed the heartbeat that you can hear at the end there. Okay. So, we have officers sitting in the officers' quarters discussing what happened. It's been a few minutes since the Kraken attacked, but no more than that. The Kraken suddenly left. The captain just came up from the hold and said he got rid of the Kraken. We won't know why until we have information about the, until we have the bargain chapter. If we hadn't already called attention to it, the first mate is coming out of his cabin. Captain is going upstairs. One of the midshipmen is coming up from below, the only surviving midshipman. And meanwhile, the people in the officers' quarter include the gunner's mate, Ollis Waiter, and fourth mate John Davies. We've now identified everybody in this room. There's not much else to know here, except for that mysterious story detail. Okay. Alright. So now, which is the next one? Okay. Then we have to go upstairs to see Paul. Okay. Yeah, the chat is debating whether or not the bosun would be carried down from the deck and be conscious and talking. It is really implied that he's drifting in and out of consciousness. They kind of woke him up. He's like, what's going on? What happened? And then he expired. It can happen. So.
Last one. Move quick. You'll not take the last one. Oh, look out.
Okay, so meanwhile up on the deck, the two passengers, Jane Bird, Emily Jackson, the ship's surgeon, Henry Evans, are taking the ship's remaining lifeboat, because remember the one got destroyed in the Kraken attack, along with the fourth mate steward, Davy Jones. Paul is trying to defend them, and this unknown topman is upset that they're taking the boat. He probably does not want to hang out. The captain, having arrived back on deck, is saying to let them go, firing a gun in the air. Meanwhile, if we hadn't identified this guy as a topman, we can now because he's climbing the rigging. On the deck, we see the first mate and a seaman come running in response to the commotion, while meanwhile down here, our midshipman is listening to the conversation, and we know how this is going to play out. Okay. Should also point out now, I don't know if I pointed it out in the previous scene, next to Henry Evans in there is again the box that contained the book that we received at the beginning of the game. Alright. Not much new information on our second. And then, immediately following that scene, is this scene. The scuffle continues.
Let them go!
And finally, this man is shot, and he is shot dead by the woman we have identified as Emily Jackson, who is a passenger, and yet I'm not good at anything. Okay. Meanwhile, the captain is getting ready to intervene also. First Mate Hoskett, unknown topman. Okay. And here's an interesting one. We can see the gunner's mate running at the midshipman. So we now know who it was that actually stabbed the midshipman, which we'll want to log in a second. Okay. Okay. Back below decks for the chaos for the continuing story.
You have a plan?
Yes. The ship was in the east. Great regimentation shells for gold. Hey, who's there?
Mutiny! Mutiny!
Fresh bastard.
No!
Couple of little dialogue details that I don't know if I pointed out the first time. First of all, the gunner's mate refers to the midshipman as a fresh bastard. Fresh being a term for a young, untrained, green person on a ship. In this case, a young officer, midshipman. The other thing to note is when they were discussing trading the fish and shells for gold, they were referring to the mermaids that the ship now had locked in the lazarette, and the shells, there was a shell in that chest, and there were shells on the mermaids. Okay. So, we know because we've identified some people in this scene, that our gunner's mate is having his head blown off by our fourth mate, John Davies. Okay. We also go ahead and just say that our unknown midshipman, he was knifed. We're now pretty sure that's what happened. And he was knifed by the gunner's mate, Ollis Wader. And he is dragging himself to the midshipman's quarters. Meanwhile, up on deck, first mate and the seaman hear the commotion. They're getting ready to come down. The captain is anguished, and who can blame him? The bodies are being tossed overboard, and meanwhile, the lifeboat is gone. It has been lowered and let go. So the people on the lifeboat, Henry Evans, Jane Bird, Emily Jackson, and I want to say Davy Jones, the fourth mate steward, are gone now. Okay. We then have another scene The scuffle continues. The fourth mate is then clubbed by this unknown seaman who came down from the deck above. And here we continue to see the midshipman dragging himself away. Really nothing else. It's just a very obvious continuation from the previous scene. And then the scene ends in the midshipman's cabin now with this.
Oh no! You're cut!
Don't leave me.
Bear up, son. I'll stay with you.
Tell Pete's mother I tried my best.
Aye.
To pull him back, to save him.
You tell her yourself. Brennan! Bring the surgeon's kit!
Okay. So we have our dead midshipman. We haven't been able to identify him from the other midshipmen. But now we can, because we know he's not Charlie. Charlie burned to death fighting off the giant crabs. And we know he's not Pete, because he just said, tell Pete's mother I tried to save him. He's Thomas Link. Okay. I realize I just got the achievement for solving half the fates. But again, it gets really easy from here, except for a few really pain-in-the-ass things. Including one that is not as big a pain in the ass, but it was a pain in the ass for me, so I'm continuing to make it a pain in the ass. Okay. Hoskett called for Brennan and said, Brennan, bring the surgeon's kit. We've got 2 people in the scene. There's 2 things we know. Number 1, this guy's a topman. Henry Brennan, I'm not going to open the manifest, just trust me. Henry Brennan is a seaman, not a topman. The other thing is that Brennan is cupping his ear to hear over, to hear better. He is emoting that he is listening, implying that Hoskett is talking to him, telling us this is Henry Brennan. There's nothing else really to identify here. We could go back now and identify the other midshipmen. That's okay. We're going to have to do some cleanup. It's going to be amazing how quickly a lot of the cleanup goes. Okay. We've now finished that chapter. And now we're down to pretty much the end of the story, which is where it began. Okay. Hoskett and Brennan are attempting to storm the captain's cabin. At this point, there are only 4 people left alive on the ship. The captain, Brennan, Hoskett, and this one unknown topman. And this explains his athletics. We already kind of ran through this scene. We've identified everybody. We're going through it as a mere formality. But they storm the captain's they're demanding the shells. So they want the valuables, they want to take. And actually, that's a lie. I said there's only 4 people left alive on board. We don't know that. There may be more. Because there's a few people we don't know anything about yet.
Where are they? Must be in here.
Brennan then comes in here, demanding the shells. The captain says they're at the bottom of the sea. He has thrown away his gun, knifes Brennan. We've been through all this. I know I'm just kind of rushing through this, but really, these were the tutorial scenes. We really gave them a lot of attention, and there's not really any new information. The topman drops down from above, coming down from above deck, comes in. He is killed too. The captain kills him because the captain is an awesome badass. Captain did nothing wrong. And then Captain did one thing wrong, and that was take his own life, but that was at the end of everything else. He went down, he was the last person alive.
Abigail.
And this is where he delivers
Your
his speech.
brother. My friend.
His anguish over killing the first mate, his brother-in-law and friend, and the disaster that his voyage has been.
I'll be with you.
And that is it.
Soon, my love.
Okay. So now we have done our full examination and deduction. We have gone back through every scene. Okay? We have put the whole story in place. We now understand everything that happened on this ship. All of the events except for one chapter. And now all we have to do is just very quickly and easily identify the 40-some-odd people that we have not been able to thus far identify and explain what happened to them. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a lot of this with the book. Okay? First of all, the unknown seaman who was crushed by falling cargo. We know his identity now. He was Samuel Peters, Nathan Peters' brother. We don't have to go back and look at the scene. There's nothing else to find out. Okay. Bitter cold. Surgeons, yep. We've identified everything positively there. We know what happened in the murder. We could go back. You know what? Okay. Let's do it. Hak Sung Lao. He was shot by firing squad. We don't know who shot him, but now we do. We can follow the trail of the bullet back to the gun, and since we've already identified this person as Seaman Henry Brennan, we know he was killed by Henry Brennan. Seaman Henry Brennan. Okay. See why I refer to this as tying up the loose ends? Because now we can leaf through the book and fill in a lot of information because we organized all the information in our head. We went through the whole story. You know, we traced everybody's position. We looked at who the different people were. So now, all right, let's get out of... Actually, let's just stay in this scene just in case we want more information from it. Okay. Hak Sung Lao. We got him. Okay. This guy. We don't know who he is. But, and we do know how he died, though. Okay. I could go back to the scene, but we can even look at the art for it. Whoops, he wasn't spiked. He was speared. The game's picky about spiked and speared. He was speared by a beast. We know he was speared by one of the mermaids. Okay. We know this guy was speared by a beast, but we don't know who he was. We might have to go back into a scene. Okay. We don't know who this steward was. Or do we?
And by the authority of the East India Company,
because remember we said that we noticed that the stewards were standing close to their officers. And so we can now guess that this is the third mate steward. He's also the guy who was bringing the food along. We could go back to that scene and look. He's been accompanying the third mate. We know this is Roderick Anderson, the third mate steward. This steward, whispering in Nichols' ear, is probably the second mate steward, because each person is accompanied by their steward. He is also the steward who is visible throughout the calling scene. And he was not knifed by an unknown attacker. We know who knifed him. He was knifed by It Bang Xia after Bang freed himself from captivity. We got her. We got that. Edward Nichols was shot by an unknown person. We might need to go back and check that out. We'll worry about it later. We also have 2 people whose bodies were never found. We don't know what happened to them. We might have to go back and take a look to figure that out. That's okay. Okay. We don't know who this person is. We don't know who this person is. We know they were spiked. We'll have to go back and figure that out. Okay. So the first thing in cleanup is we're just putting in all the information we can do very quickly. And then we're going to worry about it. Now we have this unknown steward. We have now flagged every other steward on the ship. We have only one steward left we have not identified. Zungi Sathi, the ship's steward, who was basically the head servant on the ship. Okay? He didn't serve a particular officer. He did steward duties for basically the ship. Okay? By process of elimination, we know he's the ship's steward. But also, we can take note that he has similar hair and facial hair to the Indian seaman. That is a mustache, no beard, and short, close-cropped hair. Short, kind of, it looks curly-ish to me. Okay? So, we're going to go ahead and say, this poor guy who got shot through the wall, he's the ship's steward. We don't know who shot him. We're going to have to figure that out. We got this one. Now we're in the Doom. Okay. Roderick Anderson. We identified him. We just haven't been checked in on that. Unknown midshipman. We know there's only one midshipman left. And we know that Thomas said, tell Pete's mom I tried to drag him back. Pete was the midshipman that was lashed to him. That he was trying to pull back away from the Kraken. Okay. So where are we now? Okay. John Davies. We don't know who clubbed... Oh, we do know who clubbed him. We could go back and look at the scene. But if we just even look at the graphics, we can see that Henry Brennan has a very distinctive sailor's cap. And he was the guy who was... I mean, he was one of the only people alive at that point left. Only one of the only seamen left alive. But we know he got clubbed by Henry Brennan. If you were playing this for the first time, you might actually go back and look at these scenes just to confirm what you don't know. Just to confirm the information or to remind yourself of things. I'm just doing it a little quickly to get this done. Then we have 4 people who disappeared during the escape. We know they were on a lifeboat. We know the lifeboat got away. We don't know what happened to them just yet, or do we? We'll come back to that. Because now we're at the end. We have a topman. We don't know who he was. Okay. Alright. So now we have a few problematic people in the book. A few people who are giving us some trouble. Okay. The biggest thing is figuring out who's who. Actually, let's go to the crew manifest. Let's go back to reality. Alright. Now we gotta figure out the quarrelsome people. The troubley people. Okay. So let's go look at the crew manifest. It doesn't matter what order we do things in. We're just trying to figure some stuff out. Okay. So the first question is who shot Edward Nichols? And we actually do know the answer. But we're going to have to go back and review a few things in this scene anyway. So let's go back to Nichols' death. Okay. Ahoy! He's coming back on board. He's being shot out the window. Ahoy! Who is shooting him is one of the Formosan party. We have identified 3 of the Formosans, meaning the remaining Formosan must be the shooter. That is the Formosan guard. And why I can't find... There he is. Chow Tan. Spider.
Wait! Don't
Okay.
shoot! I have treasure! I yield!
Okay.
Hold your fire!
Okay. There are a couple of other people that we didn't quite get in this chapter, so we're going to check this chapter again and see what the hell we missed. Okay. We know Bang died. Okay. We have Nichols there. We know Miss Lim died, but we're going to have to go back through Miss Lim now to get back to the other bodies. This chapter is the worst. This is why I'm clearing it now. It's not obvious how she died in this scene, but we know from a previous scene that she's strangled. We already filled that in. We know the unknown steward was knifed. I'm actually going to go ahead. Okay. This, he's getting... I think we filled this in, too. Samuel Galligan, yeah. So where are we at? Okay. So, we didn't fill in that he was shot by Chow Tan. We filled in Chow Tan's identity, but not that Chow Tan was the shooter of Edward Nichols. Okay. 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 Now, I think the next thing is the Russians. Alright, so we got that. Is this the one with the dialogue? Keep rowing somewhere there. Give us a weapon. Miss Lim, stay down. Pick up. Alright, let's go to this. We identified that guy, pipe guy. Okay. We know this guy was speared by a beast, and we don't know anything about him. That's interesting. To this point, we have not identified him as a seaman or a top.
Where is it? There! Something there! I see it!
We've identified this guy. He's Alexei. Yeah, he's Alexei Toporov. But we don't know what happened to him. Which is interesting. And we haven't identified this guy. And we don't know what happened to him either. We don't even know what position he works on the ship. Okay, except we do know that he is being drowned by a beast. Because, whoops, not by a foreign enemy, by a beast. He's being dragged off the ship. Okay. And I think I went too far, and we're going to have to go through this all again. Okay. This is awful. Because I skipped a death in here somewhere. Alright.
Aye, sir. Checked and loaded them myself.
Alright. We're going to end up having to come back to this anyway, because there's a piece of information that we're missing. We know that this is one of the Chinese topmen. We don't know who he is, except there is only one Chinese topman left. Okay, we have now positively identified all of the other Chinese topmen, meaning this last Chinese topman must be Li Hong. Okay. And at this point, not even sure how many topmen we have left to identify. Oh, we have 3. We have an Englishman, a Russian, and the New Guinean. Alright. We're going to go ahead and lock in the New Guinean. By his tattoos, he's probably not... Like, we only have 2 other topmen left. Neither of them are probably the New Guinean. So, it's this guy, and it's this guy. So we'll go ahead and lock him in. We're going to have to come back to this. We're missing some information. We'll worry about it later. Okay. Alright. So, because I hate that chapter anyway. What else can we think about? Oh! Actually, here's one. Let's do the Russians. Okay. There's 3 Russians on board, 1 topman, 2 seamen, and it's kind of tough to pin down who is who. But there is a way to do it. Okay, and in fact, that'll let us finish up the calling. Okay. We had 3 Russians who were playing cards at the beginning of a bitter cold. They're speaking in Russian, they're talking about cheating. Here they are. Now at this point, we have identified one of them. Okay. Okay. This one is a topman. We identified him because he was up in the rigging when the ship was hit by lightning. Okay? We saw him up in the rigging, we know he's a topman. There is only 1 Russian topman on board, so he's Leonid Volkov. Okay. And it's just checking off what we've gotten now. It's confirming that Maba was right. Maba's, I think Maba is one of the characters with, like, he's one of the weakest positive deductions. There's a couple of characters you can only do by process of elimination, and then there's characters who you can, there's kind of like, it's not really guesswork, it's deduction, but it's really, really loose. It's not positive identification. Okay. So now, we have this Russian seaman. This is Alexei Toporov, which means this Russian is the only Russian left who is Alarkus Nikishin. Nikishin? Nikishin. Alarkus Nikishin. And he was the one who was pulled overboard. Okay. We've now identified the Russians. We've identified the Russians. We've identified the Chinese topmen. The Chinese topmen throw a lot of people. And that's because really the only positive way to identify them is by noticing their shoes. Okay. What can we do next? What should we do? Let's do the disappearances because we don't need to go into a scene for this. Okay. We had in chapter The Escape. This is probably my favorite moment in the game, was realizing this. Okay. My favorite aha moment when I played this was this moment. Because here we have a tough one. We had 4 passengers, or we had 4 people. 2 passengers, the ship's surgeon, and the 4th mate steward. Last seen, getting on a rowboat, never seen again. We have to figure out what happened to them. The name Henry Evans might click for us. And if not, we might have noticed the box repeatedly. Because we received this book from Henry Evans. And what does he tell us? Now, this is 7 years later, right? When we received the book. 4 years later, sorry, in 1807. He tells us, return the book to him when it's completed to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. Morocco is in the north of Africa. Okay. Now, what's interesting is if you look at where the ship was at this point, because it had kind of abandoned its course. After the incident with the mermaids, okay, the ship was returning to England. As soon, they took, they had the incident with the theft and the kidnapping and the weird mermaids. They dragged the mermaids on board, and then they were like, let's go home. And then shortly thereafter, they were attacked by crab riders, and then a kraken, and then people escaped. So they were here, and is it possible that the lifeboat was eventually picked up, or was either made it to Africa, or else was picked up by another vessel and then brought to Morocco? Absolutely. So we can conjecture that, I say conjecture, but it's actually conclude. Henry Evans is alive in Africa. And if Henry Evans is alive in Africa, we're going to have to assume that the people who escaped with him are also alive in Africa. That's my favorite click moment is remembering, wait, Henry Evans is the name of the guy who sent me the book. Okay, it's my favorite moment. That's the moment where I was like, wow, this game. That's a great thing to have to deduce from. Let's go fill this in. Because we're going to assume that they're all alive in Africa. Whoops. Down in Africa. And if I could use the... This would have been a lot quicker if I could use the controls. Okay. Okay. Alive, Africa. Okay. What else do we got? The end. We haven't identified this topman yet. Do we have any... Oh, we have now, because we have only one topman left. The only topman left at this point is Lewis Walker, the person who the captain killed. We know he's a topman. We know he must be Lewis Walker. Okay. So see how we don't even really have to bounce around into the memories anymore. We can just kind of go through the book for a bit. Okay. And then we end up with just one or two things that really still give us pause. Okay. So where are we at now? Who haven't we identified? Okay. We don't know what happened to the third mate. But it's interesting, by the way, the game... Oh, no, it does say unknown. Right. Okay. Yeah, so who are we still working on? Okay. We don't know who shot the steward. We could go back and look. We don't know what happened to Philip Dahl. We don't know who killed Paul Moss. We don't know what happened to Whaley the Topman either. We're not sure what happened to Alexei Toporov. We don't know what happened to Nathan Peters, or do we? We do, because Nathan Peters... Oh, I have... We're going to have to go back into the memory and get him. Okay. Alright. So Nathan Peters is the guy who killed Lars Lind. Right? And apparently we just didn't identify him. So we're going to identify him as Nathan Peters. We also know what happened to him because he felt... But you know what, actually, let's not do that. And we don't know who this guy is yet either. But we're running out of people it could be. So, we are running out of people he could be. Okay. I do want to show you, like, I'm going to use another feature of the game here. Just so that I make sure that I show off all the features. Because if you're having a problem with someone, particularly one of these people who disappeared. Okay. So let's pick Whaley the Topman. Okay. Where the hell is Whaley? Okay. The game will tell us that he appeared in 7 memories. There are 7 scenes we've seen him in. And because I didn't actually go through this tutorial, it's going to give us the tutorial now. It will allow you to place bookmarks. Okay? And it will tell you where they were last seen or disappeared, and it will tell you where they appeared first. It'll flag them on the map. But once you've placed the bookmarks, you can then just flip quickly through the book. So the last time Whaley existed, the last time he was seen in a memory, was in Abigail Hoskett's memory. So if we're absolutely having trouble pinning the dude down, we can go into that memory and now see if we can find him. Where is Whaley, our Topman? And we see this guy being dragged off the rigging by the Kraken. And he is indeed our unknown topman, and we can say that he was drowned by a beast. And then we can go ahead and clear the bookmarks. Okay. So we can do this for anyone that we're having trouble with. Anyone that's giving us an issue, we can do that. But we had some other disappearances in this chapter too. Okay. So specifically we had 4 people who disappeared. Nathan Peters, an unknown seaman, and Duncan McKay were on the lifeboat. But where were they last seen? Let's see. When was the last time we saw them alive? In Maba's memory. Maba the topman. So let's go see if we can figure out what happened to our 3 folks in the lifeboat. You probably already remember this because we pointed them out twice. But if we're not sure where they ended up, there is the doomed lifeboat and our 3 people in the boat. And they fell overboard. I'm not saying they were drowned because they were just thrown out of the boat. Okay. Fell overboard. And fell overboard. Okay. Getting pretty close now, huh? Okay. Alright. Let's go back to our table of contents here. Let's see who we're sticking on now. Okay. We still haven't figured out the bosun's mate. And there's a reason why I'm saving him. Okay. We still haven't figured out who shot Zungi. We still don't know what happened to Philip Dahl. Okay. Alexei Toporov. Unknown. We don't know what happened to him at all. Hamadou Diom. Unknown. Patrick O'Hagan. Unknown. Alexander Booth. Unknown. Who are these people? Where did we lose track of them? Okay. And this is actually my fault. This would have been cleaner, but I screwed up going through the calling chapter again. Okay? Because we have a few people who we lost in the calling chapter. Okay? One of them is Alexei Toporov. One of them is an unknown soul. Okay. We're going to have to go back to the calling again. We're going to go through it quickly but carefully. We're not going to have to go through the whole thing. If I hadn't screwed it up, I am sorry. It's kind of my fault. So we're going to go back. Nichols gets shot. No one else here. Immediately before that, Bang burns to death. Nobody else here. Immediately before that, Lim expires. Okay. Now, we're looking for people that we haven't figured out yet. This guy we know, he is the second mate steward. He was not. This guy we know, he was the final Chinese topman. So we've gotten through them. So now we'll go into part 3, which is the steward's death. We're not going to skip that. Okay. Alright. Alright, so now here we have some dialogue that says, O'Hagan, are you still breathing? Can you row? Okay. This guy, we've identified. He's the Russian with the pipe. Okay. There's no one over here even to be talking. So presumably, this guy is talking, O'Hagan, you still alive? Can you row? He must be talking to this guy. We don't know anything about him, but he's probably O'Hagan. Because O'Hagan is present in this scene. This is a guy whose fate we haven't been able to determine. But we know he's being pulled overboard by one of the mermaids. So we know he is drowned by a beast. Okay, and now, which chapter are we in? Okay. So now let's do O'Hagan Part 2. And see if we can't find the other person who disappeared in this scene. I hate this friggin' thing.
Keep
Alright.
rowing!
Where is he?
And here we have our other disappearance.
Give us a weapon.
A Larkish Nisket. Nope.
Pick up the oars and row, you fool!
So what are we stuck on here? Oh, we didn't. We got them both. Okay. That was all we were stuck on in this chapter. Fine. Alright. Now. Remember, our goal is to fill in every page. Right? Because there's a couple of people who don't even have pages. You think I have... I don't have everyone. The game tells you when you have everyone. And I know specifically who, at least one person I don't have. Okay. We still haven't identified this unknown seaman. But we're down to just two. Alexander Booth and Hamadou Dion. It is actually possible to positively identify one of them. Okay? And I'm going to tell you how. Because this is one of those ones where it's like, oh, it's, you know, there's no way to tell either one. Okay. We have another seaman who died in the Doom. Okay. If we go back to the Doom 2, where we can see the... You know what? I'm not going to go back to it again. If we go back to the Doom... Oh, I have to go back to it because I don't actually remember who it was. Okay. If we go back to the Doom 2, the poop scene. Okay. We can see who is still alive by whose hammocks are hanging on the deck. Are hanging. Are hanging, right? And we're down to trying to identify this seaman. Or this seaman. Okay. So, we're looking for a hammock that belongs either to 55 or 57. Right? Okay. We have a hammock that belongs to 57. Okay. Which means 57 is still alive. But now, we have another problem. Because we have 1, 2, 3 unknown seamen. And only 2 unidentified seamen's names. We know this seaman is not 57 because 57 is still alive and this guy died in Unholy Captives. But it means one of the other seamen that we've identified as a seaman is not a seaman. Okay? And this was my white whale. This was my... How the hell? Okay? And there is one very important outside detail that can help you do this very, very easily. Okay? But this was the thing that drove me crazy through the whole game. Because positive identification is subtle. This guy appears in 14 different memories. We're going to go back and take a look at some of them. Okay. Okay. Just a couple. I'm not going to go back through everyone, because there's a few specifically that I want to call attention to. So the first one, oh, I'm not in reality. Okay. And again, people are shouting at me because this one's super easy. To some people. Some people have found this one the most obvious one of them. I did not. I'm going to just call a couple of scenes out. Okay. And then I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. It's our stripy shirted seaman friend. Right? The first time we see him as we work our way back through the game is in Abigail's memory in the Doom. Okay? And we see him here fighting alongside the bosun. And then the bosun, a few minutes later, is torn apart, saying, "Where is my Frenchman?" And then someone says, "Your mate was thrown over." Or your mate was torn apart, not thrown over. Okay. So already, probably getting a clue here as to what I screwed up. Okay. There's another good scene. And I think I called attention to this. Unholy Catholics. Okay. I identified this guy as a seaman because here he is. He's hauling a line. Right? While these guys are raising the mermaid. But he's not hauling a line. Okay? He's guiding the net. These people are doing the hauling. He's doing the guiding. And while this is going on, he is expressing concern for the bosun. Okay. There is another scene. We're going to do this one too. Here we go. Okay. Here again. I identified as a seaman because there he is. He's hard to see. He's down there. The crew is hauling. He's hauling with them, but he's not, really. He's steadying a line and shouting orders. Okay. There is another way to figure this out, because by now it's becoming obvious that this guy is the bosun's mate. He is the Frenchman Charles Minet. That was referred to as what happened to your Frenchman. What happened to my Frenchman? He was dragged over, or he was torn apart by the squid. Okay. What he is doing every time you see him is either assisting the bosun, showing tremendous concern for the bosun, or supervising work. Because remember, the bosun is actually the foreman. He's the supervisor of the laborers. The shop steward, if you will. Okay? And so his assistant, his mate, is working with the seaman, but always in a role where he's in control or giving orders. He is also wearing a shirt, and it's much more obvious in the sketch than in any of the scenes, but he is wearing this shirt with horizontal stripes. Okay? There's a couple of different names for these striped shirts. Okay? I've heard them called Breton stripes. Okay? Because they first became popular among sailors in the Brittany region of France. Eventually, by the end of the 1800s, they were adopted as the standard uniform of the French Navy, which is why whenever you see like French naval sailors, like in movies and TV shows and stuff, they're always wearing those vertical blue stripes and or those horizontal blue stripes, those stripy shirts. Okay, that he's wearing Breton stripes, which is another clue. Plus, what he's doing on the ship the entire time. He is always acting out his job. And because we now know who he was, we also know what happened to him. The dialogue indicated the mate was torn apart by a beast, which means this guy is the only Steeman we have failed to identify. Okay. I left Charles Mine for the end, specifically because he was the one who drove me crazy. Okay. But we're still missing something, and what is it? Well, I know one thing we're missing. Okay, we're just leafing through the book now. Everything should be typeset. Anything that's not typeset, we gotta solve. Okay, here we go. Port Walk, Zungi Sathi, the ship's steward, shot through a wall by an unknown person during the defense of the ship from the spider crab riders. All right. Let's see what we got. And everybody knows what we're going to see right now because we've already talked about it. Who shot Sathi? Why, I do believe it is a bald man in a light-colored shirt and white pants. We could actually follow him through various scenes. What you can do is you can actually go back through the different scenes to see who is running around, and who in the previous scenes fits the description of that person. He's not visible here.
I'll get you down.
Okay. I think the best place to see him running around is in I think it's the two guys getting choked. Yeah. So I think this is the best scene to see Charles Mine running around. Yeah, see here he's being armed up. And notice who he's watching. He's watching the bosun. His eye line is always on the bosun. Those two have like the best working relationship, except for third mate Martin Parrott and his steward, and fourth mate John Davies and his steward. They have such a great relationship. But who killed Zungi Sathi? It was friggin' Charles Mine, the Frenchman. And I think this should do it. I think this is everything. It is not. So what the hell else are we missing now? Probably another disappearance somewhere. Okay, escape. Oh, okay. Who sorted Paul Moss? We've identified pretty much everyone, so we should just be able to go back in the scene and see who is sorting him. And it really does make it easy if you actually just memorize the positions of most of the people on the ship.
Last one.
Okay.
Move quick.
So who is sorting Paul Moss? Is Leonid Volkov, the Russian. Two of the Russians, by the way, joined the robbery, and the third Russian tried to take the last lifeboat and keep the passengers from getting off. I don't want to make any comments about anybody's nationalities, but if we're looking at villains in this, obviously the English second mate is right up there, but followed closely behind are the Russians. Okay. Even though we haven't quite solved everything, there's a few loose ends left. We're now told there's nothing left to do. That's the game saying you got as far as you can get. And now we get to find out the ending. The only thing left to do now is to leave the Obra Dinn before the storm comes. And see, there's the box.
We should go. Storm's nearly about, so we won't be coming back.
And then we will get the final piece of the puzzle. We just have to stand still. If we decided we wanted to go back and look at anything. By the way, after you have seen every scene... Whoops.
Sit down so you don't fall out.
You can actually leave the ship at any time and leave the book incomplete. Not at any time, but you have to have seen every memory in the game at least once. But after you see every memory in the game at least once, you can leave the game at any time and just say, I don't know, I'm never gonna, you know, whatever. You know, and then you'll get an incomplete report, and you won't get the final chapter. Okay, so 1 week later, we receive our report, the insurance assessment. And it runs through the ship, which, by the way, here's a little interesting detail. The ship sunk. After we got off it, the storm sunk the ship that was adrift off of Falmouth. Okay? Cargo, the company, King's Cargo. Captain Witterell forfeited his estate. I could run through all of this. I'm just going to call out some interesting ones. The problem is, I mean, this is totally, like, everything is totally fair in here. People have said terrible things, like William Hoskett. Yes, he attempted mutiny. The captain, he forfeited his estate because he took his own life. But remember, this is an insurance settlement. So, like, Martin Parrott, even though we don't know what actually happened to him, they decided that he behaved with exceptional valor. John Davies was putting down helping to put down a No, he wasn't. He was part of the mutiny. He struggled with the gunner's mate, and then the gun went off, and then he got clubbed. The bosun, he was a hero, exceptional performance. Charles Minet, he is fined. He is fined he is acknowledged to have murdered a crewmate because he accidentally shot someone through the wall. Evans is, he's demerited for abandoning the crew. So he was only paid out, 50 pounds of his outstanding wages. We can guess that was reduced. James Wallace, he died fighting for the ship. Winston Smith, extraordinary valor. He was the carpenter. Marcus Gibbs, his wages were donated to the pension fund because he didn't have any next of kin. Thomas Sefton, even though he was a dumbass, he got his pay. Amel got his pay, yada, yada, yada. So most of this is not... Ola's attempted mutiny. The purser... BC-56 pointing out the fourth mate was a mutineer, but he objected to backstabbing the midshipman and tried to stop Reader. Yes, but he was also overheard plotting a mutiny, and at that point, it became a scuffle because he got cold feet. You can't say, well, you know what, I changed my mind when the mutiny went bad, so I don't count as a mutineer. Sorry. But again, I'm not going to try and defend all of this. But there are a few things, like the passengers are being held responsible for abandoning the ship. That seems a little bit unfair because they're passengers. But then again, why are passengers getting a more insurance payout than? Well, I mean, they should get an insurance payout actually. So yada yada yada. Beng was found guilty of murdering Zungi Sathi. He was shot. He got outstanding wages. Yeah. Anyway, I don't really want to get into a debate about all of this. I do so because you can run through this. You can find a list. Okay, it is super precise. It is insurance paperwork. Ultimately, the insurance company does not want to pay out anything they don't have to. And so, any excuse they have to deny a claim, they're going to deny it. People have gone through this and talked about the morality of the insurance company deciding who was guilty of what and who was responsible for what and yada, yada, yada. But in the end, they were not making moral claims. They were just fulfilling a contract. And if they, if there's a reason that they don't have to pay out, they're just not gonna. I'm not saying they're they're not immoral, they're just amoral. It's just their job to pay what they're contracted to pay. Not defending it, but you can read a lot into this. Plus, there is something about how impersonal the bureaucracy is, which is a theme in Lucas Pope's games, right? It's like the bureaucracy, the state, all of these things, they are all dehumanizing what we have watched. And that's actually the more important thing to take away. We watched this story of a supernatural mystery and greedy people and heroic people, and all of this stuff played out, and we saw the relationships between the people, and we got a glimpse into their life. And now what we are seeing it reduced to is a bunch of cold, clean facts and funds. Okay, it's just, we're now just assigning numbers to it, because that's what bureaucracy and business do. I'm not even saying that I agree necessarily with that assessment, but that's Lucas Pope's themes, that's his message here. It doesn't matter what's on this paperwork. The important point is that, Matthew Austin is now going the opposite route. Saying, so I'm surprised they didn't hit Petey with theft and powder charge. Because again, they were being scrupulously lawful. Okay, they weren't making moral judgments at all. Peter was fighting in defense of the ship. He was armed to defend the ship. He was acting in defense of the ship. He died doing that. Someone discharged a gun. It killed someone. That's what happened. It's not they were trying to deny everything or whatever. They're reducing it to numbers and facts. And it's scrupulously lawful. They're not good, they're not evil. Anyway, let's enjoy the epilogue instead of talking about all of this. Then I'm going to briefly defend the captain. Okay. Because there is a cleanup. So here we are in our flat back in London. 221C Baker Street, probably. Enjoying a cuppa.
Can you believe it? A package at this hour? Oh, the thing smells just dreadful. Don't open it inside. I'll be turning in now. Tea's in the kitchen if you need more.
Okay. And we have received a package. Okay. So we get a letter. I write to you with the unfortunate news that Dr. Evans has passed away. Remember, we were supposed to mail him the book when we completed it. He succumbed to his illness shortly after receiving your package. He was very pleased with your correspondence and asked that his gratitude be expressed by returning the book to you along with the means to complete it. As for the three of us that remain, referring to Jane Bird, Davy Jones, and Emily Jackson. As for the three of us that remain, the Obra Dinn is a distant memory and a dreadful chapter in our lives that we wish to forget. Do not write back. Okay, and we get the book, and we get this weird, smelly package, and in it is the mangled hand of a monkey.
that door? Gone. There's no time. We need to go. Right. What are you up to?
We are in the ship's lazarette, the storeroom above the rudder, where the mermaids were stored, and we are in the chapter The Bargain. Henry Evans, the ship's surgeon, has thrown his pet monkey into the room and shot him dead, which allows us to access the memory of what was happening in here. We have the chest, we have... why, I do believe it's Captain Steward Philip Dahl. And we have third mate Martin Parrott. And now we can fill in the final chapter and know what happened. I actually really like the way that Evans used the monkey in this way, knowing how the pocket watch exists. Okay, because it was in his possession, or knowing how the pocket watch works. He used the monkey purposely so that we would have access to this scene. And in this scene, we now have another corpse. Oh, I have to hit the thingy. So immediately before the monkey perished, third mate Martin Parrott died.
A third shell? The captain didn't toss them all. Leave it. Help me lift this. Stop! Why? Well, set you free. Give it the shell. Here. Do it. Hoist it out. To the main deck. Throw it over. Lock the door when you leave. Get the tail, boy. In return, the ship. The Obra Dinn. See it home.
So we see that Martin Parrott has cut a deal with the mermaid. Said, we'll set you free. And he has sent Paul Moss and Davy James. Davy James, not Davy Jones. Davy James to throw the mermaid back into the sea with the promise that she will escort the Obra Dinn back. That is how the Obra Dinn got back to port 3 years or 4 years late without anybody left alive on board. Okay. The two mates would then they would then climb up onto the deck, throw the mermaid overboard. Then they would help the passengers and Henry Evans escape. Paul Moss is killed in the escape attempt, but Davy James survives. And we can see that he was we can see that Martin Parrott was spiked by a beast. Because he's got spikes in him. Okay. We have another corpse in this scene, in the lazarette.
I'll kill every last one of you monsters. Withdraw the Kraken, or I will kill you all!
Okay. This is what happened when the captain said, I drove off the Kraken. The mermaids were imprisoned in the lazarette. He came down, realized that they had summoned the Krakens, that they had summoned the crab riders, and so he basically is murdering them to get them to call off the Kraken, which one can hardly blame him. There's been some discussion about the captain, and once we get through this chapter, you know, I'll call those my closing remarks. I have 2 sets of closing remarks on this final chapter.
Call it off, damn you! This is your Kraken! You brought it here! Send it back!
Okay. Remember, the crew had a total of 3 mermaids imprisoned. So the captain shoots the first one, spears the second one, and ultimately the third one is set free. Presumably, after the second mermaid is speared, that is when the Kraken leaves, and then that is when Martin Parrott, the third mate, comes in here to cut a deal. And then we get to the last page of the book. The Captain Steward Philip Dahl, who was imprisoned in here after he went nuts because he thought the mermaids were demons, which also fair, and started swinging swords at his crewmen, or his fellow crewmates.
What's this? Quicksilver.
Oh, oh! 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 Herregud.
I like that last little bit. Is like just to remind you that he's Swedish. Okay. So he opened the chest, found one of the shells. It's unclear how many shells exist, by the way. And then he opened the chest, and as before with Bang, he burned to death because of the magic of the chest. And we can't fill that in until it gives us the page. So, a lot of people have... there's a couple of... So let's call these my closing thoughts. Let's finish the book, and then we're just gonna have some closing thoughts. My vest has gotten unlaced. But, okay. We know that he was burned to death. And now we have solved the book. Okay. And now we can leave back into reality for the final time. So I like the trinkets of, like, the previous insurance adventures that the investigator has had there on the shelf. I also believe if you get out without solving the book, I believe that there are fewer trinkets or no trinkets on the shelf, implying that, well, you're kind of a bad insurance agent because you couldn't solve the book. Okay. So, that was Return of the Obra Dinn. A game I absolutely love, and I think it is absolutely a brilliantly designed logic puzzle. I call it a game, but really it is. It is just one very complicated, extended logic puzzle with a really, really neat mechanic. The the momentum mortem mechanic is absolutely fantastic. The presentation is top notch, because when you're designing a game like this, where it's so reliant on you noticing very, very small details. I need to turn down the music a little bit so that I can hear myself. It's so reliant on you noticing very small details. The game is really, really careful to keep you moving at just the right pace. A lot of very interesting choices were made, like the fact that it does the silent movie thing where you see the dialogue, you hear the dialogue as you're reading the dialogue, and only after you have heard the dialogue, then the scene opens and you can see, and even then you can move around, but you're not allowed to access the book and solve anything until you have to wander around a little bit, is just to slow people down and to make sure that they're actually paying attention to the scene around them. The choice of the graphical style, I talked about that. That was important, just first of all, to make the game possible. Because if he'd had to do like a very complex 3D models and character animation, all that stuff, it would have been a nightmare. So instead, he chose this very evocative style, which is very interesting because it manages to look old-timey by evoking a bygone era of computer games. And thus, in a strange way, that is appropriate for an old-timey period game, is that it's presented in this old-timey period media. We associate both with being old-fashioned, not to mention that those particular graphics, the Macintosh black and white graphics, they were actually very excellent for very fine resolution. By not using any color data, they could actually have more resolution than you would otherwise have. And so it let him create these detailed sketches that looked like woodcuts, which is appropriate for the time, but also at the same time very information rich. The pacing, where you go through several scenes where it rushes you to, now look at this body, now look at this body, now look at this body. And then it lets you stop and breathe so you could go back and kind of piece things together through the scenes. We didn't take much advantage of that because we kind of stepped through everything. We just did 2 runs through all the scenes instead of letting the game pull us at its pace. We just said, you know what? We're not even going to try to solve anything. We're just going to take in all the information we can. But you could see that by doing that, you know, once you hit that point where, okay, I've now gathered all the information, you can just kind of very quickly step through and solve a lot of stuff. Bang, 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 bang. Oh, I know this guy was Nathan Peters because he was the only one who was still alive. Got it, stuff like that. And I wrote this down, and it became important later. Of course, I did assume that I was a perfect observer here, and, you know, you might not notice when you went through certain scenes that the hammock labels were there, or you might not notice the shoes or the tattoo. Obviously, to some extent, I knew what I was looking for, so it would be completely reasonable to do a third pass and say, okay, what, you know, is there information in this scene I missed? And what would normally happen to drive that forward is click moments, where the game is very good at, by revealing one piece of information, telling you how it's possible to get more. So I called out the one where the game kind of makes sure that you notice the hammock tags, just by how it has the camera pointed. So that as soon as you notice the first hammock tag, you immediately start looking at all the hammocks. And then you go back to the Doom and you look at all those hammocks. And then as you're looking at the hammocks, you're also now paying attention. You're like, oh, people have hung personal effects next to their hammocks. Or, wait a minute, I saw that tattoo and now this guy is sleeping with that tattoo. And so the game is really good at getting you to notice things without just calling attention to it and saying, hey, by the way, as you go through the game, you've just discovered a hammock tag. You should look for more hammock tags in other scenes because they could give you information. The game leaves it up to you to teach yourself by making it obvious once so that it then recontextualizes everything you've seen. You know, the first time you realize, oh wait, you know, I can use people's positions around the ship and lock in these people are top. Then you're like, wait, there was a scene where they were all in the rigging. I can go up there and just like, that's all the topmen, and I can flag them. And so as you realize the different tools exist, you can go back and do them. That's called recontextualization. Okay, which is what happens when a moment in a game makes you suddenly see everything that has happened before it in a different way. We call that an aha moment or a click moment. In Metroidvania games, it's that moment where you unlock a new ability and now you're trying to think about, I've seen 3 jumps like this that I can now make. I'm going to go back and do that. Okay? Recontextualization is important. And recontextualization is also very important for a narrative, which is why I'm now going to say something negative. The bargain chapter is, it's your reward for finishing the game. And it is very clever how Henry Evans uses the game mechanic. In world, he understands it well enough to have, like, basically recorded that information so that you could go back, so that you could view it, right? That's neat. What is less neat is that what happens in the lazarette, it ties the 2 pieces of the story together, but not in a way that recontextualizes the story. Okay? One of the interesting things is when the solution to a mystery is revealed to you. You have that moment of thinking back through the whole story and saying, well, wait a minute. I remember when he walked into the room and he wiped something off his hands. His hands were bloody in that scene because now I know the solution. And things like that where you run back through the thing. It's also when you watch a movie the second time that had a mystery at the end and now you're trying to catch all the clues. Recontextualization. The bargain chapter barely recontextualizes the story. What happened in the lazarette was very straightforward. The captain went down there, he threatened the mermaids to call off the Kraken, and then they did. Which is basically what the story had already said to us. He, the captain said he drove off the Kraken, and now he's coming up, and it's like, yeah, he did. Okay. And we already knew there were mermaids down there, and we already knew the shells were there. All of the major elements, all of the big surprises had already been revealed. They were revealed really well. Like the moment where you go into the first memory and you see the Kraken, and it's like, oh, it's this kind of game. And then again with the Crab Riders, which is like, oh, okay, Kraken was one thing, but we're doing Crab Riders. And then it was mermaids, and that was about 3 was the limit, where it's like, oh, okay, it's the only reveal you have, and then there's this other supernatural sea creature, But like, I'm being facetious. But with the bargain chapter, I was actually a bit disappointed to find out that the bridge that put the story together really didn't reveal much. What it certainly didn't make clear was what the hell was the shell? What the hell was the chest? Why did it work that way? Why were the Formosans transporting it? Why, if they knew this thing, if it got near the water, would summon evil mermaids? Did they bring it on a ship in the first place? All this stuff. It's like, I wanted to know what the hell was going on, but at the same time I also understand that it's kind of better that you don't know. It's fine that the shells and the chest and the mystery, the mystery of the shells and the chest are, never explained. Okay? That said, a lot of conversations have happened around this game. A lot of conversations happened around, because I've obviously checked into what people said on forums and Steam and yada yada since I played this game back in 2018, because I've been, planning this stream for 6 years, apparently. And I did check out some of the conversations. One of the things I already commented on was people talking about the morality of the insurance company and how dare the insurance company decide this person is guilty and this person is innocent. As I said, they weren't deciding guilt or innocence. Okay? And for that matter, there is also the open question of whether they, like, whoever was reviewing the paperwork and processing the claim, because you're just an adjuster, you provided this information, and then someone decides to fill it out. What information did you even give them? Did you tell them the whole story? Did you let them see the pocket watch? Did you keep it for yourself? Is the pocket watch a known thing? Is this just is this something that is known in the world? Some people have talked about that. This is just a world where magic pocket watches exist. I don't get that impression. I get this as, this is a world where one person had one supernatural pocket watch and chose to use it to help an insurance adjuster get the real story. And the insurance company doesn't care what the real story is. They're probably very impressed by the thoroughness of the report. I certainly would be. This is very impressive, unnamed insurance adjuster. How did you get all of this information? I have my ways. But, they weren't making moral judgments or whatever. They were processing a claim. It's paperwork. It was dehumanizing. It boiled down this story of crime and heroism, because there were definitely heroes in the story. And I think that's purposeful, actually. There were terrible people in the story, like Nichols and his whole crew, and the Russians. And then there were heroes in the story, like the midshipmen and like the ship's officers. But in the end, it doesn't matter because you were still just there to fill out paperwork, and you did. And that's what we're reducing this down to, is paperwork. And I think that's kind of a sad, kind of a cynical message. I can't say it's entirely wrong, but also it's a really neat theme to take away. I do want to say also, since I'm critiquing things a little bit now, the first chapter that you see, the end, is an excellent tutorial. It is an excellent little self-contained tutorial that gives you just enough information that you can actually make a few deductions and learn how the world works. And it shows you the final moments. But Hoskett and Brennan launching a mutiny when there were only 4 people left on the ship. 6 if you count, Parrot and Dahl were dead at this point in the lazarette. So there were only 4 people left alive on the ship. Okay? I'm not even... at this point, the captain was... What was the captain doing? Was the captain just had he just, let's stop the ship and just drift here? There were no lifeboats left. The ship was barely able to sail. So Hoskett and Brennan decided to just assault the captain to steal the shells. For what? And it was Hoskett at no point in the story actually seemed remotely greedy or selfish. He was kind of a non-entity through most of the story. He was just also there. We pointed out the heroism of Martin Parrott and the criminality of Nichols. And of course there was, the fourth mate, who was very protective of his steward, and he was a good guy. And until at the end, when he was talking mutiny because the thing had gotten a disaster, and then he gets cold feet. So he was kind of and even then when you look at him in the officers' quarters, he was devastated. So he was a mutineer, but he wasn't much of a mutineer, right? So it was really out of character for Hoskett and Brennan at that point. But something had to happen to kill off everybody. Because, you get down to one person, and the captain can, end himself. But something had to happen to the other ones, and the captain didn't exactly go mad and start murdering the crew. So it was very out of character. A lot has been made about why the captain didn't just give the mermaids the shells? Why did he go berserk and start killing them? You know, and then it is the spelling out that the captain, he was kind of a monster. Because all he had to do was put the mermaids back in the ocean, give them their shells, and everything would have been solved. But that's assuming knowledge that the captain didn't have. Okay? Throughout the game, we have these very incomplete translations coming from the Formosans, who, by the way, they put the ship in terrible danger. I understand Nichols was responsible, but also they put the ship in terrible danger. And I assume at no point did they tell the captain, by the way, we are transporting an enchanted chest filled with lightning fire magic and shells that attract demonic sea creatures that will, you know, if it gets damp, you know, basically the entire ocean is going to attack and destroy your ship. I'm guessing they didn't disclose that, which seems a little irresponsible. But nonetheless, there's no reason to assume that anybody knew anything about the shells. Even at the end in the Lazarette, you know, when they release the one mermaid and the mermaid launches its spikes and spikes Perret, he starts pleading with it. He doesn't immediately say, here, give it, you know, he doesn't immediately say, we'll give you the shells back. What he says is, look, we'll set you free. Okay, it's fine. And when the mermaid is like, then the mermaids calm down a little, it's just, then it's at that point that's like, okay, give it the shell. I don't know. Give it, throw it, whatever. All right? So there's no reason for anyone to even think that the shells were what the mermaids wanted. Okay? No one was alive who could explain that. No one could translate who could explain that. The captain had no way of knowing that. All he knew was that the second mate and several crew members kidnapped Formosan royalty, took their treasure, came back, everybody's dead, including the second mate, because he was shot before even he could explain what happened. So now there's just these these two boats filled with mermaid corpses, a dead second mate, two dead Formosan royals, and a treasure chest. And the captain is supposed to put this back together. They're interrogating the one remaining Formosan. They can't translate what he's saying. And in fact, there's even an implication there, where the Formosan is saying something like, the shells are dangerous, they're going to get us in trouble, they're going to get us killed. And the Chinese topman who is translating says something that sounds sort of like, he says, give us the shells, you will all die, this is all your fault. It's like, what? What just happened there? Because he did say, this is, the Formosan said, this is your fault, we're all gonna die. You know, it was like, okay, that's not clarifying, and then he got spiked. So I think that right up until the end, like, the captain was anguished in several points. You can clearly see. And there was a lot of emoting work done. There's a lot of body language. Like, you could see the genuine care that the different members of the crew had for each other, the mates and their stewards, the bosun and the bosun's mate is my favorite, because once you know to look for it, in every scene, the bosun's mate just has this level of concern for the bosun. And they're always working together. It's awesome. The midshipmen, especially, not Charlie, not Peter, Timothy. No, not Timothy. I can't remember his name now. The last one, the one who died. Like, he is anguished at seeing both of his companions die. You can, like, he's just deflated every time both times it happens. It's awful. You know, and the captain is anguished too. And when he's giving, you know, at the end, he gives the lifeboat to the remaining innocent passengers and the surgeon and the stewards. You know, those are the people he gives the last lifeboat to. Thomas Link, thank you. So, you know, and then when the crew's trying to stop him, he pulls a gun on them, and he's like, no, let them go. We'll die with the ship. That's our job. These people, just let them go. You know? So I really feel for the captain. I don't think the captain was a villain at all, and I don't blame him when dealing with sea monsters he can't communicate with that came out of nowhere. Perhaps he could have thrown them back, but also, if you discover mermaids exist and you have 3 mermaids, you really gonna throw them away? Like, I'm gonna bring them back. Like, I feel like, we should study this or know they exist. Yeah, if only because I'm a nautical guy, I'd like some threat assessment here because there's apparently a mermaid kingdom, and now I would like to know. So anyway, that's my defense of the captain and my defense of the insurance company, which I'm not saying the insurance company were good people. I don't think they're good people or evil people. I think they were people who were contracted. And that's it. So that's the return of Obra Dinn, and that was the whole thing. And I hope that no matter, if you've played through the game and know it really well, I hope I still manage to give you some new tidbit or some piece of information, point out something that maybe you missed. And if there's something that I missed and you're watching back this recording, please feel free to throw it in the comments, because it would be interesting to know. There's so much. It's so information rich. And that's it. So, thanks everybody for hanging out. I know it went way long both nights. And if I continue to do streaming of video games in the future, not next week, but I'm thinking of doing something the week after, which will be Wednesday, June something. I gotta get over to my calendar here. So it would be Wednesday, June 19th. So Wednesday, June 19th is, I'll probably stream something. And I'm going to control the time better, so we'll split it up into like 2-hour sessions, because I can't keep doing these late nights. But anyway, thanks everyone for hanging out. Thanks for watching. It was a lot of fun. I'm really glad I did this. And everybody have a great night and an even better tomorrow.